Welcome everybody to the Retro Brawler stream. I'm Rob, and I have several guests with me tonight. I'd like to go ahead and introduce everybody here. First person we have guesting tonight would be artist and sprite artist extraordinaire, James, otherwise known as Scroll Boss, Ill Scroll, or PrimeOp. How's it going, James?
Good. Oh, it's going pretty good. Good evening, everybody.
So, what you been up to lately? Got any projects in the works?
Just getting some stuff ready for some future sprite showcase videos. One of those will probably have some very bad dudes in it. I don't know if you'll get it from the subtle hint. I don't know.
Sounds kind of makes you want to shout, "I'm bad."
Yeah, I can see how someone would get the feeling of that.
All right. And my next guest with us tonight would be Tim, the lead singer and guitarist of the band Bathroom of the Future, whose song Capcom Girl you just heard. Tim?
Uh-oh.
He's here, might be having some audio problems.
I shouldn't be laughing, but god damn it.
Hey, remember, whatever can go wrong will go wrong.
God, yeah,
So
I am chuckling at our comrade's misfortune. Tim, you there, sir?
Maybe.
Yeah,
Yes,
we
there
can
you
hear
go.
you now.
Every single time I have to do anything on the internet, I am the one with audio issues, which I think it's my curse for attempting to tell people I'm a musician, right? This is what I get for my arrogance, is anytime I go anywhere, I'm still going to have audio issues. But hi, everyone, it's me. I'm back.
Yep. So Tim is here, and what do you got in the works for any projects, Tim?
Well, actually, it's funny you should ask. I'm happy the stream's happening when it is. This Tuesday, we actually have a brand new song coming out called Post-Convention Depression. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's kind of a song we wrote about how we got to play Dragon Con last year and how we're all sad it can't be Dragon Con every day. So if that's anything anybody here has grappled with as far as attending, like, video game shows or anime conventions or anything, I think you'll find it pretty relatable. That comes out on all the major streaming services on Tuesday. And then from that, we're going to have some pretty big shows coming up through the year that I can't quite tell people about yet, but you'll hear about it soon enough.
Cool. I see Great White North stopped by the chat. And thanks for stopping in, and thank you for sharing that. And anyone who's been following these roundtables should know him by now, but I'm going to go ahead and reintroduce Mike.
Hi.
So what's up, Mike?
Not a lot. Nervous stuff going on my end that I don't want to share at large, but life maybe about to get kind of turbulent in a good way, but like there's a lot of things I have to try and set. I know that's being vague, but stuff's happening. I will say that.
Well, that's okay. There's stuff happening everywhere, and I see that BL85 Gamer is here. So, and it's good to see us back. Well, we are back. And
Whether you like it or not.
yes, exactly. Well, and as anyone who's been following me online knows, I've got some books coming out soon. I won't go too much into those at the moment. But also, I helped with the making of a vinyl edition of the Splatterhouse Arcade soundtrack, which is currently up for pre-order.
Sweet.
So,
Great cover too.
Oh yeah, that can't think of who was it did that, but that was really good. So,
Rob, if I may ask real quick, not to sidebar, but as somebody who has tried to release things on vinyl and has run into great difficulty every time, how did all that go?
basically, and this kind of plays into what I have to say next. Kurt from Hardcore Gaming 101.
Yeah.
He found out about this and knew that it was a project that Space Lab 9 was working on. and they'd asked him for help, and he's like, I think you should contact them. You're the Splatterhouse guy. I dropped them an email. We got to talking, and one thing led to another. I wrote the liner notes.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love Kurt. I've only interacted with him very briefly, but it's always been very positive. Big fan of his site.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I've known him for probably close to 30 years now.
Dang.
Yeah, I've known him for a long time at this point as well. Like, I more or less got involved in his circles around the same time I did Rob's, and I've actually taken up to writing on HG 101 for him again after a very long hiatus.
Awesome.
Because people were saying lately that they liked the stuff that I wrote for, and that just kind of got my my spark going back, and also, a little bonus cash that couldn't hurt either, so,
And that's a nice feeling, right? Knowing that somebody actually read something you put out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very gratifying to know that's not all just falling into a void somewhere, so.
Screaming into the internet ether, as we all do.
It's a pretty big ether as well, and it's scary and wondrous, but maybe also exciting, or, whatever Q said in that one really good Season 2 episode.
Yeah.
Oh, Star Trek, I'm so sorry. I hear Q and I assume the nice old man that gives James Bond his exploding pen.
No, not Desmond Llewellyn, I'm sorry, John Delancey, but either Q's good.
I was going to say, what if they met? That is like a two-man stage play I would have gone to see.
Oh,
Holy
definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very pithy.
Although Desmond Llewellyn is unfortunately dead now. But,
He is.
There has been Wishaw in the new films, so.
I love him, although that's also because I'm a Four Eyes that owns a lot of sweaters, so I find him more relatable than I do Daniel Craig. Nothing against Daniel Craig, but I know which one of these guys I can talk to about things.
Anyway, though, all of us have had stuff that's gone out for sale on the internet in one way, shape, or form. So, James with his artwork, Tim with his music, and me and Mike with our writing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
it's a living. Quote, random bird appliance from the Flintstones.
Now it sounds like we're all the Flintstones dishwasher. Great.
That's all I ever think of when I hear that phrase, no matter who's saying it.
It's a living.
Why wasn't there ever a Flintstones beat 'em up? I know there were some decent Flintstones 2D games, but I feel like it would have lended itself very well to a brawler the same way The Simpsons did.
Yeah, I could have seen that.
Yeah. Hanna-Barbera beat him up. I want to say maybe Johnny Quest would have fit for that too.
Oh my god. All right, so you got Johnny Quest, you got Yogi, he's like the tank, he's like the slow one that hits hard.
We gotta have George Jetson in there with his gadgets and stuff.
Oh, yeah. George would be like, what's her name? Nicole from Guardian Heroes, where he only attacks with gizmos.
You gotta have Hong Kong Phooey in there somewhere. Maybe even as unlockable.
Absolutely.
And then he's just Guy.
Yeah, I was going to say he'd be the Shiva of the game, but...
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I don't know. If he's unlockable, you got to make it work.
All right.
Anyway, we should probably
let carry away with this.
Yes, exactly.
I did mention Kurt. I recommend to anyone interested in retro brawlers, which we're defining tonight as like belt scrollers, think Final Fight, Streets of Rage, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the arcade game, that kind of thing. I'd advise anyone who's interested to check out the Hardcore Gaming 101 Guide to Beat 'em Ups, Volume 1. Excellent read, a lot of good stuff in there.
And I might have a thing or two in there, although honestly I don't know. I
happen to have the book right here, so let me check. Let's see. Mike. According to this, you covered Silent Dragon.
Wow.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
I like that one.
It's a weirdo, to say the least. I like it too. I mean, somewhat laziness aside, like, two of the characters are just the exact same. They're just head swaps for one. And, like, one of the bosses is a complete ripoff of Jaggy from Fist of the North Star. And he's also just a head swap of the boss in the stage you fought before. But, I can go off on all sorts of tangents and we'll never get started for real, so... Rob, go ahead.
Well, one thing I want to do first, this is the first roundtable I've hosted where we've basically tackled an entire genre or something. Before it's either been like series specific or console specific. So, kind of wanted to go in why we all picked our avatars the way we did. James?
I picked mine because Final Fight's probably my favorite series, and I always pick, for some reason, I always picked either the balanced characters or the speedy, can't take much damage characters, and Guy's probably my favorite.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm gonna. I think, and yeah, out of the entire genre, Guy's probably my favorite, not just because he's a ninja that wears tennis shoes, and the artwork mostly. There's something kind of cool about that, but.
Yeah, he's one of my go-to characters in Final Fight. I can tell you that. How about you, Tim? Why Bart?
So when I was growing up, one of my favorite things in the world, as it remains to this day, was The Simpsons. I would watch it with my dad all the time, and as soon as we found out there was a Simpsons arcade game, a lot of my early arcade game exposures was either from the Tilt arcade in our local mall, which was kind of a minor arcade chain from like the 90s, or there was a place in Michigan that there was a few locations of that was, it was called Major Magics, and it was kind of a cut rate Chuck E. Cheese's, except with sort of like a vaguely like, almost vaguely Yellow Submarine-esque theme instead of like animatronic rodents. And right, Major Magic specifically, right in a row, had the first Turtles machine, the Data East Real Ghostbusters machine, and the Konami Simpsons machine. So The Simpsons was one of the first beat-em-ups I ever played, and for a very, very long time, whenever I played it, I would insist that my dad had to play it with me so I could be Bart and he could be Homer, a trend which continued like well into my adult years when they re-released on the Xbox, and I would continue to make him play it with me. So I think it's largely just because like whenever I think of beat-em-ups, I really just associate it with The Simpsons because it was my first big exposure to sort of like a more traditional example of the genre.
That's a good answer. Now, Mike, between you and me, one of us has the more obscure character. But since
Yes.
since I'm talking to you now, I'm going to let you explain why you picked Rue from Streets of Rage 3.
I don't really have as deep a reason as our compatriots. I just always really loved the novelty of a brawling kangaroo, which I don't think any other beat 'em up ever has done. The closest thing is Roger from Tekken, but of course that's a fighting game, not a beat 'em up, so that's immaterial for now. But I mean, I ever since I finally got into the Genesis, very late in 2002, mine, but still, that's when I officially got a physical one. The first Streets of Rage is one of the first 3 games I got for it, the other being Sonic 1 and Gunstar Heroes. And I have, as anyone would be, I've been a fan of Streets of Rage ever since. And one, while maybe a little bit oldish and no, I don't want to say a little bit unrefined, the first one is, I still really like it. 2, of course, almost everyone I know loves 2. But I've always found 3 very underrated. It had a darker feel to it, and the music was a lot harsher, but it was also by far the most how profane can we be, by the way?
Well, this isn't really aimed at kids, and I think we have mainly adults watching here, so go ahead.
Okay. I just want to say that 3 is by far the most batshit entry of what was formerly the trilogy, because it had lots of robots, it had a dancing club, being chased by a bulldozer, all sorts of crazy shit like that. And the mid-boss of Stage 2 was a clown with a whip who sicked a kangaroo on you. And if you manage to beat the clown without killing the kangaroo first, the kangaroo, aka Roo, joins your team, and if you have to continue, you can play as him as well. And I just always thought that was a really cool touch that just like made me wish that we got a less borked version of Streets of Rage 3 in the West, because I almost like it more than the first 2 in some ways, but I know it's kind of an acquired taste. Plus, I just love animals, and I can't think of many other games where you get to play, of this genre, where you get to play as one, so, yeah, I just kind of went all over there.
That's a good reason as any.
Fair enough.
Now, mine, on the other hand, okay, for those who don't know, you might look at that character and go, "Oh, that's clearly Indiana Jones." Well, no, it's not. That is Jen from the game Growl by Taito, and Growl is nuts. It's not like completely out there, like say, Pularula or something like that, but it's like Taito tried to get the license to an Indiana Jones movie, couldn't get it, and decided to go ahead and make their own game anyway out of it. So, and it's just got some of the most weird little voice clips, and then there's that bit where the elephant attacks the tank, and I just love that game. So, Jen became my character for this. So, alright, before we start getting into it, let's catch up with the chat real quick here. See, Fatal Vision is here. Good to have you here. And that thing you're mentioning about the Super NES where you can play the Japanese Final Fight with Guy, if anyone feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, there was a Blockbuster exclusive that featured the other Final Fight from Japan, the one where they swapped out Guy for Cody, or vice versa. It was called Final Fight Guy, and it was released over here as an exclusive, and as such is now worth a ton of money.
I don't want to jump in, but growing up, that was actually the one I had because like 90% of my games in the 16-bit era were Blockbuster used purchases.
Get out! Holy crap!
So I remember reading about that. I was, God, what, 9 maybe, and I remember thinking, wow, Guy, he looks sick. So I wanted to go to Blockbuster to see if they had it, and they were selling their copy for like $30, which, that was the 90s, so that's like $1 million now. So there's no way I could afford it these days.
Yeah, I have to ask, do you still have it?
I'm sure I do. I'm real bad about getting rid of games unless like I specifically choose to, so I'm sure it's buried in some tub under another different tub of Transformers in my basement somewhere.
And it is being observed by top men, I'm sure.
Top men.
Now, Fatal Vision, he also said that the Final Fight thing was like a converter. I've never heard of that before, especially since the Japanese Final Fight was basically what we got over here originally, and Guy was, just a separate cartridge in both regions. So that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I do regard it as an interesting curiosity, but as I'm sure we can all agree, the SNES version of Final Fight, which character was in there, is probably one of the worst hack jobs of an arcade to console port I've ever seen.
It was rushed.
I didn't think much of it back then, but when I actually got to play the real version, I'm like, oh wow, this sucks. And I don't think I ever went back to it ever again.
I was never sure why it didn't have multiplayer as a child, because so many other 16-bit beat-em-ups did. I would look at it and I would think, man, I literally have a copy of Captain Commando that I can play with a friend of mine. Why is this not the case for Final Fight?
Anyway.
Well, Final Fight came out, I think it was almost a launch title in the US.
That sounds right, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, they were able to get away with it in Super Double Dragon because both characters use the same sprite set, so you're not taking up as much RAM with a completely different character. So you were able to do it there. But with Final Fight, you've got completely different player characters to deal with, so that's their sprites take up more RAM in the system. So
it's true. Guy's only sin was being too different from Bimmy.
Yeah, that and they are larger sprites to boot. So that tracks. It sucks the industrial area was booted out too, but
on the other hand,
RAM
lost Rolento, right?
Yeah, that and I'm pretty sure that's why Rolento was carried over into the console exclusive Final Fight 2 as kind of a mea culpa. I thought he debuted in that game for the longest time though, so whoops.
Was Rolento in the Sega CD version?
Oh, yeah.
I have it. I don't remember.
The Sega CD version was complete, pretty much. It was the much better port back in the day by and far.
it was complete with sexy Weather Channel saxophone music. The soundtrack on the Sega CD version is bonkers, and I love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, especially the one I think is the West Side Music where you hear that voice in the background going, oh, oh, like that's going the extra mile. I'm not sure how much it fits, but I still love it. So,
I mean, it fit the fact that it was 1993 and they had the space of a CD-ROM. We were drunk with power.
Exactly.
Yeah, Red Book. It was what it was.
Speaking of the Sega CD, BL85 Gamer says, I heard Genesis. I'm out. Well, get ready to hear a lot more, but everyone on 3. 1, 2, 3, Genesis.
Genesis.
Genesis, oops.
Does what Nintendo don't.
Blast processing.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, at least 2 of the characters on our image here are from Genesis games.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could argue 3 with the Final Fight CD ports. So
Yeah,
Well,
because
shoot,
that
at
was the only
that
place you
point-
could get Guy.
yeah,
And at that point, everyone had to play through Bart's Nightmare no matter what platform it was on. So yeah, this is a pretty Genesis heavy bunch here.
Yeah, I rented that back in the day, SNES, but still, that game sucked. And
Please, nobody play Bart's Nightmare.
no, please don't.
And
Never.
let's not forget that Growl was a Genesis exclusive when it came to the home port.
That's right.
Until the PS2.
Yeah, because that was the only place where I learned the characters' names because of the Genesis port.
Exactly.
Genesis. You thought they would have been named just for the exact port, but weird how that worked out.
Yeah,
but
there was a canceled port where his name was actually Sue Fammy, but that didn't come out ever.
Yeah, but I also wanted to notice something about all our avatars. This wasn't entirely... I don't think this was intended, but we all represent 4 games of what I would call 4 of the big 5 of beat 'em ups. Although maybe Taito's status is debatable, but they did make a hell of a lot of arcade brawlers, and they were all very weird and quirky. Of course, Capcom speaks for themselves. Capcom's arcade beat-em-ups are among my favorites ever, for the most part. Konami also had some pretty good ones. I can tend to be a little more mixed on them, but undeniably, they had the market on multiplayer, had the 4-player games back then as well, and 6-player in the case of X-Men. And Sega, with the Streets of Rage trilogy, were kind of thought of as the kings of the home console beat-em-ups for that alone, as well as some pretty damn good ports of Golden Axe and Alien Storm. The 5th of the big 5, I would say, is the veritable progenitor of the genre, Technos Japan, creators of Renegade and Kunio, Double Dragon, and I guess the Kamba Tribes.
Yeah.
I have Brawl Brothers. Finally.
So 2
That's
things.
Jalico.
Yeah.
Oh, was that? Oh no.
Yeah, the Rushing Beat trilogy was Jalico. Yeah.
Was Jalico the
Snarb
company that made all the Chester Cheetah games back in the day?
That was
I
Kaneko.
forget. Kaneko. Yeah.
Kaneko. I was close.
Right.
Jay and
sorry.
Tanner right next to each other.
James, go ahead.
Yeah, in the chat, Snarb Streams mentioned 64th Street, which is basically leads into the Rushing Beat series.
Yes.
Even to the point where in the first stage in the first game, you're going past a street sign that says 61st Street, so you're only 4 streets away.
That's a rough neighborhood.
That's
Oh,
welcome,
yeah.
Snarb. Glad to see you here.
Hey, Duder, one of my best friends, as it were. Yeah, we both like 64th Street quite a bit. Again, as James said, leads into Rushing Beat because it's also a Jalico game. It is not a sterling beat 'em up, but it does have an odd charm about it that I can't shake. I mean, how many other games take place in the, 1920s or whatever that it was set in, and that was also a beat 'em up? Also, its boss music is very obnoxiously loud for some reason. I like humming it to troll Snarb, so...
It's got to keep you on your toes.
I love that game though. I love that game and the whole series. It's even when it's not all that great, it's still a lot of fun.
I actually claim that Rushing Beat / Rival Turf, you gotta have the exclamation point in there. Terrible cover, by the way, in the US. I actually claimed when I wrote about Rushing Beat, the trilogy in HG 101, that simply because it has 2-player, I asserted that the first rushing beat was better than the SNES port of Final Fight. And some jackass got really uppity to me about that. Like, I don't know. What do you guys think? What'd you say? Like, I know Rival Turf ain't in great shape.
Complaints on the internet. What do you?
Yeah, what do you
I know it was unheard of. I was incredibly shocked. Like hey, I dare talk shit about DD Crew, and the only fan of DD Crew in the entire fucking world told me I was wrong and I didn't play the game right.
Well, yeah, that's why we have Google alerts.
Yeah, that might be part of why I stopped writing for a while in retrospect, but I digress. Ugh.
Anyway, before we get into the belt scrawlers we're all here to talk about, we got to at least tip our hat to the originators of the genre. You know, the single-plane brawlers, Kung Fu Master and whatnot.
Yes.
Yeah, so I remember kind of thinking about this after we talked about it before the stream briefly, because like belt scrolling is a huge part of it, but I do feel like when you define it by that, there's still some stuff you're missing, right? Because like Altered Beast, right? Like that's a game where you're a huge jacked guy that slowly walks to the right, punching other guys in the head.
Mm-hmm.
Like what else is that other than a beat 'em up? Even though you don't really have that sort of like X and Y axis action, right? So yeah, there's definitely some room to like include stuff like that, or Bad Dudes, right? Because Bad Dudes kind of works almost like a Shinobi, where it's like two planes.
Yeah. But
Altered Beast.
Yeah, all it lacks is that Y axis. So really, it's still a beat 'em up to me. So
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's still a careful that's a great point actually, because I think that's still a careful thing to like delineate, because you go too far in one direction and then, okay, any game where I kick somebody is now a beat 'em up. So great, Osmond's a beat 'em up. Nothing means anything anymore. But then on the other hand, even if you limit it to just stuff that belt scrolls, you're still missing out on some of the real early examples.
and well, let's face it, the game I'm known for is technically considered a beat 'em up.
And I don't think that's unfair, right? It's like the only thing you do in Splatterhouse other than punch is jump, and you jump way less often than you punch.
You do some kicks too,
definitely.
Yeah,
That's true. That's
Jump
there's
kick is
hitting, there's hitting, and there's jumping. Yeah,
and there's
I
sliding.
mean, if you're hitting people,
weapons.
you're belting them. So
That's
that's
true.
what the point of isn't that what I thought that's where the name came from.
Oh, I thought the belt part came from the fact that the 2.5D plane that you travel on kind of looks like a belt. I don't know, or a conveyor belt. I'm not sure. Where did that come from anyway? That's a good question. Shit.
I don't know.
Because I mean, people our age didn't really hear the word belt meaning to hit people unless you watch a bunch of really old crap, which I watched a lot of old crap. So
Same here.
that's the only reason why I know it in that in that term.
All right, and
That's a fair point.
it explains our Hanna-Barbera conversation earlier.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Before we go on,
Lots of-
welcome Chris and it's Eugene. Both of you, welcome to the stream.
Yeah, what up?
So, you guys might remember that Eugene, aka EC Myers Vids, was on with us a while back discussing the NES. Speaking.
Yep, and I remember your epic fight over Super Mario Brothers 3, which I kind of encouraged, but yeah.
Speaking.
Wait a minute. Did somebody have beef with Mario 3? That was the first video game I ever played.
Oops.
Oh
Thanks,
no,
Mike.
Well, you guys can hash out your differences later. I wash my hands of this.
Yeah.
Are we gonna have to
we're
put
sticking
barbed
to
wire
Brawlers
around the
again.
ring for this? Or
Mike, I'm afraid I'm gonna have to ask you to leave the board.
Thanks, Bruce. Okay.
we just slowly see the Roo sprite disappear.
BL85 also said, "Big props to Urban Champion that paved the way." I don't consider
Oh,
that to be a
no one will
No.
ever give props to Urban Champion.
that included, but it's basically like a prototypical one-on-one versus fighter.
Yeah. It goes more that way than the way we're talking about. Although, I guess we will address fighting games later to an extent, but that's not going to be the main focus, so...
And welcome, Animated Taco. Thank you for coming to the
Boy.
stream.
Yep. Gotta say hi to Taco because I know him from we go all the way back to some old GI Joe message boards.
There we
back
go.
in the day.
Nice.
There we
Nice.
go.
And he was and I met him there, and he was the one person talking about Metal Slug all the time. So, needless
Hey.
to say,
Hey.
me and him talked a lot.
Metal Slug, yeah, he's a man of taste.
And he's also a top-notch animator. So
Even better.
we got to give him
Excellent.
Heck
got to
yeah.
give him a shout out here.
Awesome.
Anyone who can draw gets my respect because I know that's something I can never do, no matter how hard I try.
Oh my god, same. The visual arts elude me. Like
Yeah.
like anybody who even tries drawing has my respect forever, even if it's not like great, right? Because it's still more than I can.
I, on the other hand,
same.
have an original print of the Memoir of a Virtual Caveman cover art and the original sketch for the Park Game Guide to Retro Horror hanging on my wall right now.
Heck yeah.
But as Fatal Vision put, Kung Fu definitely has to count. Yes, it does. And
Yep.
in fact, James and I were discussing that earlier today. It's like, what was the movie? Game of Death?
Yep. Game of Death.
Yeah, it was like a video game before it was a video game. Beat the boss.
Right. Without Game of Death and the Warriors, we would not have beat 'em ups in the form we know them now.
Pretty much.
Exactly.
Warriors is a huge cult classic favorite of mine, and Game of Death was going to be Bruce Lee's best film if he didn't die before it was finished.
Ah,
Yeah.
The result we got was very muddled. So a shame, but yes.
And Eugene's jumping to the defense of Urban Champion.
Urban Champion's not bad. Honestly, I'd play it before I'd play Clue Land. I think Clue
Oh,
Land is
same here.
Nintendo's shittiest game, but
Neither of them can be good. It doesn't have to be a zero-sum game.
true.
No one's gonna make you play Clue Land or Urban Champion.
Good.
I actually played Urban Champion for like at least 30 whole minutes once. Like I was just whomping the CPU a lot. I was on a roll. I just wrote it out as far as I could, and I kind of had fun. I'm not gonna lie, but
I don't know how it happened, but I wound up with a copy of 3D Urban Champion on my 3DS. I don't know if maybe it was given to me because I was a GameStop employee at the time or something, but I remember thinking, oh, Urban Champion. I vaguely remember this existing for the NES, and I tried to play it for 5 minutes on a train, and that was the last encounter I ever had with it.
excellent.
Yeah, Ice Climbers is a different story entirely, Eugene.
Yeah, I want to like it because Smash Brothers, but what, you know.
Anyway,
Ice Climbers has that Kid Icarus problem where it's fun in theory.
Yeah.
Yeah, not bad way.
I think I'm the only one who likes the original Kid Icarus. So
I actually like it too. I just think it's got some problems.
I love
It
Kid, and I
does.
really like the 3D Kid Icarus because it fixed some of the things that are kind of irritating about Kid Icarus. Don't get me wrong, I played the crap out of Kid Icarus when I was a kid. It's just a little harder to go back to than even some other stuff from kind of that same era.
I like it,
Yep.
but I sucked at it then and I suck at it now.
Yeah, same. Yeah, that's way better than what I said.
So for the record, none of us hate Kid Icarus. Also, it's
Oh.
not a beat 'em up, so
It could be. Pit would be a great beat 'em up character. We've seen how good he is in Smash Brothers.
and arrow him up, I guess, which you actually can do with King of Dragons with the elf, but
that's true.
So, speaking of which, now that we've tipped our hat to the single plane brawlers there, let's get back to the belt scrollers, which is what everyone's here for. So, let's start with this. James, what would you say your favorite brawler is of all time?
Mine is probably just gonna have to stay Final Fight. There's something about it that I don't know. It's got everything that I want in a beat 'em up. The controls are crisp. All of the enemies are interesting, and you've got some really nice character intros to boot. I mean, you've got Damned basically punching a hole in the door to start his fight, and Rolando kind of making cameos, dropping grenades on you before you fight him, and it taps in all that action movie imagery that makes me like the genre so much, because I grew up watching kung fu movies and action movies like The Warriors, and that's what makes me like it. And it's like you're playing one of those films.
Nice.
supreme.
How about you, Tim?
So, admittedly, I'm torn because I want to say The Simpsons just because I feel like it's sort of like such a perfect encapsulation of what Brawlers can be. Right, like it's got varied environments, it's got varied enemy types, it's got like fun team up attacks if two of the players are too close to each other. It has multiple players, right, which I think is pretty important for the brawler. Somebody mentioned the X-Men arcade cabinet earlier. I remember seeing the full 6-player version of that for the first time. God, I want to say at Cedar Point in Ohio, and having it just blow my mind that many people could play a video game all at once, right? So I want to say The Simpsons, but then, and hear me out, but for kind of similar reasons. Kind of like what James was just saying. When I think about a brawler, I tend to think about Captain Commando a lot. I had that for the Super Nintendo growing up, and it's like everything I want a beat 'em up to be, right? Like the characters are all like pretty distinct, and they have their own, special attacks. There's a lot of usable items along the way. The plot makes no sense and gets inherently sillier as the game goes on. Kind of going back to what Mike was saying about Streets of Rage 3. So somewhere between Simpsons and Captain Commando lies like my idea of what a beat 'em up can be, and everyone I've played since then I've kind of mentally compared to one or both of them.
That's a great choice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, I should have asked this earlier, but to everyone out there listening, is our audio okay? Are we all sounding about the same volume, or I'm sure someone would let me know by now if I had to turn something up.
Hopefully.
But
or turn me down. It wouldn't be the first time.
And you're the one up on stage with the guitar.
It's true. I need the guitar so nobody notices I can't sing.
Okay, yeah. Sarp said you're a little quiet.
I've got my volume at max. I can't go any higher.
Oh, well.
So.
Well,
all right, Mike.
Screw you, Suts. So I could maybe say Streets of Rage 2. That would be maybe a little bit too plain Jane an answer. Plus, I have to admit, the very recent Streets of Rage 4 might have actually topped it. That is unquestionably the greatest beat 'em up in the 21st century to me, but I would like to go for a more nostalgic pick, and it is yet another Capcom game to attest to the general quality of their beat 'em ups in general, and that would be Alien versus Predator.
Yeah.
I do like both franchises quite a bit. Maybe I'm not the most loony fan of them, but the first two Alien films are excellent. I actually thought Alien 3rd was underrated. I did see that one director's cut or whatever. And the first Predator is great. I think the second one is underrated. It has Gary Busey in it, so that is what that is. Alien versus the Alien and Predator properties have crossed over several times in movies, in comics, and in video games. Like, besides the beat 'em up, there were also several first-person shooters based
all
on.
Of them are good.
Yes, very surprisingly. The very first one ever made is apparently the greatest Jaguar game of all time, for whatever that's worth. But the Capcom beat 'em up is, even if it didn't have the licenses that did, is just a superb fucking game. The aliens are crawling out of the woodwork. It's very fervent. There are several different types to take care of. It's very fast paced, and the 4 characters, which are 2 of the Predators and 2 cyborg Marines, because if you're going to make the Marines cool, you make them cyborgs, which I think was a good strategy. They all have surprisingly extensive move lists. Like, it's not just punch and jump. There's do press down up, you do a Shoryuken. In midair, you do dive kicks. You all have guns mapped to a separate button. It's a very chaotic game that not only is it my favorite Capcom beat 'em up ever, but hey, it was actually in a childhood arcade of mine to boot, and it would often get my play for many minutes whenever I went to that arcade. I never beat it. I didn't realize how long it was, and I also didn't realize that the last 2 stages admittedly are a little bit long in the tooth, if I had to criticize it, especially the final stage. But nonetheless, I had a lot of fun with it, and it is just so cool. Excellent use of the license. Sadly, it is due to it also being a licensed title that we will never officially see it on any modern-day compilations, so emulation wins again. It is what it is.
Well, I don't know. Crazier things have happened, right? Like
Yeah.
I used to sit up in my room bitter that I sold my Xbox 360 because I couldn't buy Scott Pilgrim, and now it's easier for me to buy Scott Pilgrim on platforms now than it was the first time it came out for the PS3 and the 360.
Plus,
Very good point.
It's
as
even on
Eugene
PC
knows,
now.
Yeah, like you go back in time and tell me in 2010 that Scott Pilgrim is now a computer game, I would just look at you blankly.
And
Yeah.
don't forget, as Eugene put it, it was re-released on something at least.
That's the
Right.
Oh, boy.
We're talking about that big arcade stick that's the word Capcom with joysticks coming out of it,
Yep.
right? I'm so happy that thing exists. I'm never going to own it, but like, God, yes. Thank you, Capcom.
Very
Well,
nice.
as far as my favorite brawler, well, I mean, grew up playing them. You know, I think Double Dragon was the first arcade one I ever encountered, and sometime after that was Final Fight. You know, basically everything we've all played. And I would go with the unconventional pick for me and pick Growl, because it's basically Indiana Jones and the clone poachers from outer space. But
True.
I have to give the nod to Splatterhouse 3.
Natch.
It was the first Splatterhouse to go with the actual, you know, belt scrolling thing. And it's got its problems, don't get me wrong. But overall, it's a fantastic brawler. And if they were to tweak a couple of the issues it has, it'd be pretty damn near perfect. Plus, you gotta love that move where, you know, those bits of Rick's chest just kind of burst out in all directions and knock everything out.
Yeah, once you learn how to do that and the spin kick consistently, you pretty much won the game, but I really like a lot about it nonetheless, so.
Yeah.
Also, might be undoubtedly the scariest game ever on the Genesis or even during the 16-bit generation. I remember I was too slow in stage 2. I didn't even see the full you-know-what, just the first stage of that. I was like, okay, I think I'm turning this off now. Good night. Yeah, no, that's justified. I mean, I think I was like 13 or 14 at the time. Like, not exactly a little kid, but still kind of a wuss, so, yeah.
That's totally fine. I had to
Yeah.
I had to make my cooler older cousin play through Resident Evil 1 for me while I just like watched in fear, right? I think that's understandable.
That's okay. I got freaked out by Silent Hill at like 1 a.m. playing in my room with the lights off.
That's
And-
valid, yeah.
And I was in the school.
That's understandable.
Those little ghost kids. It's like,
Oh god, those squeaky little fuckers. God
Yes.
damn it.
I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm done. Saving my game, I'm done. All right. So
I don't need this. I
They're a
can
little
just watch
creepy.
Kindergarten Cop if I want to see this school.
Exactly. All right. So let's flip things around here. How about your least favorite brawler, James?
No, you know what? I think I've already had my answer. It's probably Burning Fight, the SNK game, with the rip-off version of Guy in it. And I don't know if it's a specific problem with what I was trying to play it on, but just the idea that you could be walking into a fight and your character would just drop his weapon right before you're about to use it. That bugged me a bit for some reason, because I mean, if you're in that situation, you're not going to do that. If you're in a movie, your character's not going to do that.
Exactly.
But the worst part is it needed some more fine tuning to it, because especially on that elevator stage or that lift stage, the heavyweight guys that jump up and, you know, do the Yokozuna splash on you, they can hit you in a loop where you're just, if they hit you once, you're dead, because as soon as you get up, you're gonna get hit again. And I don't know, that's pretty cheap, and there's a few instances like that. Everything else about the game is really nice. It really does lean into that action movie feel. It almost kind of feels like a, I don't know, late 80s Golden Harvest kind of martial arts flick or something out of Japan from that time, especially with the characters, and especially if you look at the character names and the backstory to it. But just playing it, it's not enjoyable.
Yeah, if I may sidebar a bit, it's rather disappointing that as much as I love SNK, they never really had many, if any, great beat 'em ups. The Neo Geo as being a very prominent machine for fighting games. You'd think that they do well by that other genre that we're talking about now. With weird way of wording it, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I never found any of their beat 'em ups all that good. They looked nice, at least. I would say that Burning Fight is definitely one of their more relatively mediocre ones. I mean, Robo Army and Mutation Nation weren't much better, but they looked all right at least. And then there's the Sengoku games. First two, 3 is actually seems kind of good at first, but you get into it later, and it does admittedly become kind of a slog. Our friend of mutual friend Bobinator has that as his Sengoku 3 is his most hated beat 'em up of all time, which seems a little extreme, but I can kind of understand it to an extent. So yeah, I just found it a shame that their beat 'em ups were never all that great. I love SNK,
I
but
felt
it
the
is what it
same
is.
way.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
It's weird.
of,
It's really, really
Holy
weird.
shit, Bob's there. He backed up what I just said.
Oh man.
Holy
Ask and ye
shit.
shall receive.
You can't make this stuff up, folks.
Nope. Anything else you want to add, James?
Not really. I don't want to talk about Burning Fight anymore.
All right.
Ellen,
How about you, Tim?
Just
All right, so I got two because I think one of them, they're both kind of edge cases, actually, so feel free to tell me neither of these count, but kind of going back to what we were saying earlier about how earlier versions of beat-em-ups didn't have the belt scrolling, even though the objective was still just, you know, walk to the right and hit guys. Those rules, Batman Forever is one of the worst beat-em-ups I've ever played in my life, or just bad games, right? And it's especially painful because, kind of going back to some stuff we were talking about a second ago, Batman Forever is especially painful because all of the Batman Returns games were super good, even though like they were different from platform to platform. Konami making the Super Nintendo one into a fairly traditional beat-em-up, at least it is in every other level. So, like, Batman Returns was doing great, and then suddenly Batman Forever comes out, and then you see that dreaded Acclaim logo on the package, and it, you know what you're in for, right? It's got like, what is the term for it when you're doing those, like, Pit Fighter Mortal Kombat sprites where it's like a
digitized graphics.
Yeah. So it's got those. It says Acclaim on the box, and it is connected to Batman Forever, so in theory, I shouldn't be able to get mad about it, because I should know that this game blows. But Batman Forever's really bad. Batman Forever is the first time my dad ever returned a video game on my behalf because it was like crappy and unplayable, right? Which I feel bad about to this day. My other one, and I hate to say it, I cannot deal with the Adventures of Bayou Billy.
I hope you saved the receipt.
I have tried to play the Adventures of Bayou Billy. I tried to play the Adventures of Bayou Billy with a gosh dang zapper because I knew it would work with one, and I could not get behind that game. And I feel bad because I think that's Konami as well, right?
Yeah.
Like,
It is, yes.
so maybe Konami should only make beat 'em ups if they're licensed, because all of those are fantastic. But like when you leave them alone, then stuff like Bayou Billy happens.
I don't know.
Now, as I say that, I am somebody that defends Snake's Revenge. So, like, maybe I'm the wrong guy to talk to about Konami.
Snake's Revenge is not the worst Metal Gear game.
Snake's
I will say
Revenge
that.
is fine.
Yeah, it's flawed. It's no Metal Gear 2, but
No. Yeah, as soon as I
think it's
actually
got
found out what
merit.
Solid Snake was, then it was not even a contest. But Snake's Revenge is fine.
yeah.
You know, two things before you start, Mike.
Sure.
When it comes to Bayou Billy, I honestly have to recommend Mad City at any time
Yes.
over that, because it's what we would have got if Konami hadn't basically pushed the game into being broken.
Well,
So,
Yeah, it got the same treatment Streets of Rage 3 did several years prior.
yeah. And I also wanted to say for the record that the Genesis version of Batman Returns is garbage.
Yeah, it's not great.
I have it for Sega CD, and I like it. I'm hard-pressed to say if there's, like, a ton of differences, admittedly, because I'm not super familiar with the Genesis one. I remember it being hard, but fine, right? Like, obviously, it's not as good as the Konami one, but I would pick either of them. I would pick either of them blindfolded without me being allowed to use a controller over trying to play Batman Forever the normal way.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
does help that both Konami Batman Returns were both brawlers.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, I want to acknowledge something Bob said. Batman Forever also got an arcade game, which is completely different from the console games. It is more of a straight beat 'em up, and I wouldn't call it great, but holy shit, it's off its meds. It's a real dazzling light show that makes absolutely no sense. Batman and Robin can, like, grow in size and just, like, flash a lot. Like, it is so video gamey and just a real... It's even more insane visual trip than even Joel Schumacher could have possibly directed, if you can even fathom that.
I am very sold on this. I never ran into this back in the day, but I'm incredibly... Do we know who made it?
Not off the top of my head.
This can't be a claim. This actually sounds good.
No, I don't think it is. Hang on, let me type that in. Actually, you can hear my keyboard forever. The art.
Yeah, you can probably hear mine too.
Also, I'd like to say hello to my sister who has popped into the stream finally.
Awesome. Oh, also, no, Snar brings up a good point. I also really like all of the Sunsoft Batman games, except the Genesis Return of the Joker, but that's a story for another time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. I think the Genesis really had a precedent of Batman being like a shooty or platformer. So I am completely in agreement with that. Maybe that's why I like it so much, because all of this... I like almost everything Sunsoft ever made, right? So I'm the wrong guy to ask.
Yeah. Even their earlier games have a good deal of charm, even if they're not excellent. But
Sure.
yeah, and Bob said it was Iguana Entertainment, the same makers of Turok, several years later. So
good.
Very interesting pedigree, to say the least.
When it comes to Sunsoft, we just won't bring up Blaster Master 2. So, anyway, go on.
It doesn't count, yeah.
No. Blaster Master 2 didn't happen. Blaster Master 2 didn't happen, and the Genesis Return of the Joker didn't happen.
Yeah.
I believe... So, a friend of ours, Awad, is in the chat, and I believe they're saying that Batman Forever Arcade is the Saturn and PlayStation port. So, if that's the case, it sounds like I'm about to have to go buy more Saturn games, and that's a good problem to have.
Yeah. Yes. And also, I want to say
at today's prices. Or?
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. It's okay. I paid off my car.
And also, I wanted to say Vendetta and Violent Storm are really awesome. They are unlicensed Konami beat-em-ups that are great. And Metamorphic Force that Star mentioned in the chat. I've been dragging this out so much. Anyway.
Yeah, I was going to wait until we got to the... I didn't know if we were still doing a section on the Konami beat-em-ups, but yeah, I did want to stick up for Crime Fighters 2, which is Vendetta, and Violent Storm. Those are incredible, but...
Love them.
Well...
Violent Storm's the best Konami beat-em-up ever made, in my opinion. But...
Well, let me ask you this,
Definitely.
Mike. Have you made your statement about what you think is your least favorite brawler?
I also have two that I could mention. I'm genuinely split between both of them. First one I want to mention is one I alluded to earlier. I wrote a bad article about it, and it's very disappointing that despite being made by Sega, it turned out as crappy as it did. That's DD Crew, an arcade exclusive that is best to remain there. DD Crew, it kind of frames himself like a late 80s, early 90s action title, and it starts out greatly where you have a criminal who turns out to be the penultimate boss, buzzing one of your heroes, FF, saying, "Yo got a bomb in yo pock!" And then the screen blows up or whatever. The game looks pretty neat. The graphics are actually fairly detailed for 1991, and that's the only credit I can give the game, because the gameplay is just so awful. The main bugbear I have with it is that, you know how most beat 'em ups, whenever like enemies overlap on each other, it's like your punches can hit both or all of them at the same time. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's like splash damage for hits. Yeah.
You think that should be a given? Not in DD Crew. You can only hit one person at time, and they will hit you back even if you can't reach them, and it is terrible. Throwing, you can only throw them when they're on the ground. You can't normally grab them like Cody just walks in and knees them in the gut. You have special moves that are basically you running at the opponent and launching a drop kick at them. However, if you don't put enough distance between you and the enemy when you try this move, you actually bounce off of them and take damage. So,
That's terrible.
Yep.
That's
yeah. There is so much. It's a really shitty game all in all, and also only 2 of the characters are viable. One is kind of slow and has bad hitboxes. The boxer, and the kung fu guy is just really shitty all around. All of his moves are just really drawn out. They have too many animation frames, and so if you're not playing FF or King, then you're not doing it right, unfortunately. Also the enemy variety is terrible. There's only like 3 or 4 sprites that, like the last one that appears is in the 3rd stage, and then you're just beating up the same guys throughout the rest of the game. I mean, that's a problem that a lot of other beat 'em ups have, but there's just so much terrible about it. I could spend like 10 more minutes, but I already draw things out way too much, so I'm probably just going to cut it there. Sorry, Tim, you're going to say something?
No, actually, I'm completely in agreement with you. Like, DD Crew looks great, even though, like, at least 2 of the sprites are the exact same guy doing the same weird JoJo's Bizarre Adventure pose, wearing, like, different colored vests. And, like, It looks awesome, but it has that... It's like, you know how the, like, items react in River City Ransom? It's like everything reacts like that.
Yeah.
It's like things just ping-pong off each other, and then I can't punch anybody.
It is just a real slop job of a game.
Part of the disappointment of it is, it's Sega. You're thinking, okay, maybe this is the long-lost ancestor play cousin to Streets of Rage. And especially when you look at the graphics, and they kind of remind you a bit of how Streets of Rage 3 looks. So you've got high hopes for it. And the disappointment, it's not the height, it's the fall that kills you. And just
oh, it's beautiful.
The disappointment of finally getting to play that, and it's like, wow, this was released, really? It's just disappointing.
You guys could have been spending this time making more Space Harriers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or another Alien Storm, anything.
God,
yeah.
Yes. Actually, that's a
really
great
good.
point. I probably played Alien Storm more than I played any other beat 'em up on the Genesis, honestly.
Good choice.
Totally be down with Alien Storm too.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And also Arabian Fight, also a Sega arcade beat 'em up. That one also sucked. I don't know what was. Must have been B teams working on those. I don't know.
BB Cruz, got it.
But yeah, the other beat 'em up I would say is one that I personally hate, is just the most mediocre one I have ever touched, and it is one that is also based off of a DC property. That would be The Death and Return of Superman.
Oh, yep. There it is. Not good.
Yeah, you think it would be at least a nominally cool game, but it's just so bland. Like, there are technically 5 different characters as per the comic arc. So you start out as Superman, then you play as the imitators that rose up in his wake, like Cyborg Superman and Steel and the Eradicator and Superboy, and they don't really play all that different from each other, so that kind of undersells the premise of the gimmick. It's just, and like every stage is just like the same 2 or 3 enemies over and over, and they take much longer than they should. It is a textbook case of a Superman game really pussifying Superman. Like, he can get taken down by punks with chainsaws, and unless those are kryptonite teeth on this chainsaws, there should be no reason that is fucking happening. And I will tell you this. I think it was like stage 4 or 5, or 5 to 6, somewhere. Yeah, I want to say stage 5 and 6, where he plays the Eradicator through a dark alleyway that is boring and sucks. And then stage 6 is the destroyed coast city, where it's not much better, and you have to fight Cyborg Superman at the end. Then you play as Superboy for the next 2 stages after that, and they are the exact same 2 stages that you just played. Zero alteration between them, except that you're Superboy instead of the Eradicator now. But that barely fucking matters, since they more or less play the same anyway. And that even includes fighting Cyborg Superman again at the end of Coast City, and he unfortunately killed Superboy. And then I reloaded and saw I had to do Coast City all fucking over again. And I noped out. I just fucking quit there. I do not usually do that when I get dead set on wanting to play and beat a game. But this game, it broke me. I really didn't want to carry on. It rarely happens. It's, oh my god, it's just so terrible. Although, like, a year later or so, I did eventually knuckle through and beat the entire thing. For some reason, I'm just stubborn, I guess. It wasn't really worth it. It didn't get much better after that, so...
Well,
Oh, Knuckle Through, wasn't that the Japanese name for Streets of Rage?
Bare knuckle, but yes.
I don't like saying bad things about Sunsoft games, but it is a real shame what happened to Sunsoft after a while.
Yeah, they kind of sucked throughout a good chunk of the 16-bit. I mean, Batman the Genesis was great, but like then they just licensed themselves out to like you said, the bad port of Revenge of the Joker on the Genesis, and
Yeah.
Roadrunner Death Valley Rally was one I grew up with for some goddamn reason. That one wasn't great. Oh yeah, lest we forget Arrow the fucking Acrobat.
that at least wasn't terrible. It was not
Well, okay,
great,
fair.
but it wasn't terrible.
Not the worst product of the Sonic ripoff boom, as Dyer, I'm sure you can say a lot about.
It's better than Bubsy.
Extreme critter genre.
Yeah. Better
I
than
would play-
Bubsy. Bubsy's better than Awesome Possum, at least, so there's that.
Yeah.
Bubsy's better than Awesome Possum just in the sense that Bubsy stays on screen the entire time you're trying to play it. It's a thin line otherwise.
Awesome Possum is just terrible. But while we let Mike recover from PTSD,
Yeah, do that.
I'll go ahead and list mine. I've picked 2 as well, and again, I have played many bad brawlers, but the 2 that really stand out in my head. First one I actually bought. It was used, so I didn't pay full price for it, thank God. And the other one was a demo. But the yeah. Well, the first one was Target Renegade. I actually bought that used and regretted it. I regretted it so badly. The original Renegade looks like a masterpiece compared to Target Renegade. So it was just so bad. It looked bad, it sounded bad, it played bad. I did not like that game.
Renegade 3 was even worse. Thankfully, that did not come to the NES. Can you fathom it?
Yeah. To address my sister here, Bushido Blade's not the kind of game we're talking about, Sharon. That's more of a one-on-one fighting game. We're talking about stuff like Double Dragon and Final Fight.
Although Bushido Blade is great, I would like to
Fun
say.
and good, though. Yeah, it is worth
it's
mentioning
definitely
just in the
good.
sense that it doesn't suck, yeah.
Definitely.
And Fatal Vision is definitely right. Aliens versus Predator on the Super NES was terrible.
Oh my god, yeah, it does not deserve to share the same name as the Capcom game. Fuck you, Jordan, same makers of Musia, a classic Japanese tale of whatever the fuck.
Sharon, regardless of whether or not it's retro, it's not the kind of game we're talking about. So,
Sorry.
the other game I had in mind was that Double Dragon game that was made by some company, and it was released on the 360, I think. I played the demo for it and was like, what is this garbage?
Oh, that really bad Double Dragon 2 port.
That's the one.
Wandering something or other. What the hell was it called?
Wondering.
This one I
Dragons
don't
or-
remember.
Yeah, I was able to
I've
get
heard
on-
of it and saw it.
60.
It was just,
What was it called? Wonder of the Dragons, yes.
yeah, that's the one.
I heard it was extremely hyper-nuclear terrible. I forget if I actually played the demo myself, but woof.
I'd like to hear the story behind that because it seems like a weird thing to be able to specifically just port Double Dragon 2
Yeah.
and then do whatever they did with it. I never got to play it though.
And
I feel like that was
I
an
don't, I don't
era
have
of
any.
like
I don't have any Xboxes, so
I feel like that was kind of an era of like bad brawler ports in general, because like Turtles reshelled.
Yeah,
Right, like-
that was actually more or less the same deal as this
Yeah.
game.
it's like-
I wonder. James kind of has a good point. I wonder if it's some weird licensing thing where it's like, okay, well, if we don't make a Double Dragon game, we lose the Double Dragon rights. So let's just crap this out while we convince WayForward to make Neon, which was good.
yes.
Yes.
that was fun.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, yeah, in fact, Fatal Vision also mentioned Double Dragon 3. Now, the arcade game was really bad.
Yep.
I didn't mind the NES one so much after I learned how to play it, because it was nowhere
You know,
near
the NES.
pick up and play as Double Dragon 1 and 2. Yeah.
Yeah, the NES port, while incredibly difficult, is a much more valid game, and it doesn't have microtransactions, so there is that.
Yeah.
Despite me trying to put quarters into the cartridge slot of my Nintendo to make the game easier.
Yeah, that just isn't gonna work, sorry.
nuts.
All right, so let's kind of go off the beaten track here for a little bit and talk about some of the weirder brawlers we played over the years. Got any in particular you really enjoyed, James?
I'm trying to think here because it seems like as time went on, the beat 'em ups. Once you got past the usual street violence theme of them, you started to get a wider variety of more and more places to fight and just weirdness. I mean, you already mentioned was that Puli? I can never remember the name of it. The title of
Rula.
it.
Yeah, that one.
That one.
That game rules.
Because that game is bugged out and is fun. Of course, a lot of people like Ninja Kids. I love that one
Oh yeah.
with the ninja puppets,
Die.
and it was
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah,
And it
one of
was
them looked a lot.
weird.
Yeah, the green one especially looked a lot like Bert, so bonus points.
It was weird how for I don't know how long no one ever mentioned the fact that they were a bunch of puppets, and I kind of wonder if people even noticed that.
It was like the fighting game genre meets the Muppets.
And I don't know.
Fun though.
Dad, what's
Oh,
the
yeah, I loved it.
I don't think I got to play that one until one of the Title Legends games, and that was just like, okay, this is cool. I like this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
there were because you remember that era when we were basically if something popped up on MAME and it was in one of your favorite genres, you'd try to check it out,
Yeah.
and it was fun just seeing what would be in the next MAME and what popped up on there, and that's when I first ran into Ninja Kids, and I was like, man, this is a crazy game that I never even heard of it before, and it was fun. And then you think about that, and then you think about the beat 'em ups you were waiting to play, and you finally get to play them, and they turn out to be something like DD Crew. I have
humanity.
I have friends who like it, but I just can't agree. They say, well, there's a specific way you have to play it, and well, there are a lot of games out there that are great, and they're completely intuitive ways to get you to play a game.
Yeah.
And if you have to hunt down some kind of file or some kind of list to figure out how to play a game, did they really do their job?
Yeah, no, I totally have to agree on that. I mean,
Yeah.
I do miss the era of video game manuals, and certainly there were some games where you did need them, but I do, manual or no manual, I do think that a good game teaches you how to play it through intuition, just through its construction. Like I said,
Exactly.
that doesn't necessarily apply to every type of game. Like if it's a Koei strategy title, then yeah, I'd probably need to do my homework in advance. But a
Yeah.
beat 'em up, it should be really goddamn self-explanatory. It's a genre where you just punch people a lot.
You can't really stand in the middle of an arcade and read a manual. You're standing in front of people. you'd be standing in front of paying customers. If the manager sees us, like, get out of the way, kid, let a paying customer through. You unwashed trash,
Exactly. What the hell?
So that's another thing I wanted to bring up, is that I've seen people complain about, well, this beat 'em up has no story, and it's an arcade beat 'em up, and the idea is, look, you're in an arcade. What you usually see is some kind of demo saying, hey, this game is interesting to play. You don't need some kind of War and Peace introduction to the game to be able to play it. And if you do, once again, that's somebody not playing the game. If you owned an arcade, would you want somebody sitting there reading and not paying? Or would you want them to immediately say, hey, this is interesting. Bloop. Throw your quarter in and start playing.
Exactly. It's like you're not there to see a movie. You're there.
This may explain why we didn't get a Metal Gear Brawler.
I mean, the closest thing are those side-scrolling segments in Snake's Revenge, which are admittedly the worst part about the game.
Oh,
but
yeah,
it is what it is.
Now, before we go on, Fatal Vision was wondering, does Bayou Billy count? Now, are you asking if it counts as a weird brawler or what?
Because if it counts as a brawler, I pick that as one that I hate. And if it doesn't count, then I apologize to the family of Bayou Billy.
Well, I think in the sense of being weird, it's definitely an unusual setting compared to, like, say, Double Dragon or whatnot. It's not.
It's an unusual setting, and it works weirdly. Like, it's a beat 'em up with light gun segments. That's not a sentence you get to say too often.
And driving. Mm-hmm.
I'd still say it counts as a beat 'em up, though.
Yeah, that's the majority.
I mean, you walk for the most part, you're walking around beating them up. I don't know what else there is to say about it.
Yeah, like Vice Project Doom has overhead shoot 'em up segments and first person shooting segments, but it is still primarily a Ninja Gaiden-esque action platformer. So, I'd say the same distinction applies to Bayou Billy. But I guess it's just semantics at that point. I don't know.
There's one thing I always thought Ninja Gaiden needed. It was more shooting, so I was grateful Vice existed.
Really good game, though. One of my favorite underrated.
Yeah, no, Vice rules. I was always really afraid of the box art when I was a kid because it was just like a painting of like someone's dad surrounded by explosions hugging someone.
True.
This game is about a dad's feelings.
Wow, the original sad dad game.
Yeah. Nowadays you say that and people are like, "Oh, I love the new God of Wars."
Actually, I do.
Pretty much.
Actually, I do. Actually, really like those games, but that's neither here nor there.
I'm sure they're fine. I'm just mad at Sony. That's on me. That I don't want to make it Kratos' problem.
Valid.
Consider this though. At least it's not a game where you have Al Bundy wearing these retro shades, punching the logo of the game and seeing the metal underneath his fists.
Shatterhands is also a great game.
But you tell me that dude on the cover does not look like freaking Al Bundy.
I mean, first thing I just thought was the Terminator, although that's a really lazy way of putting it.
It was the late 80s. Everything was a cyborg.
It looks like that's what they were going for, but it does look like Gold's Gym Al Bundy.
Jack Bundy. I'm not comfortable with this.
Human growth hormone Al Bundy there.
Al, let's have sex.
No peg.
No peg. I'm trying to save mankind.
And so speaking of which, Tim, what about you? Weird brawlers. Your take?
So James alluded to it earlier, but I feel like any discussion of weird brawlers can't be complete without an inclusion of Puli-Rula, which is Puli-Rula for a long time was my favorite game to convince people who recently built a MAME machine to play with me. Like, hey, yeah, I got all these arcade games on here. I haven't heard of like half of them. I was like, all right, let's go to the P's. I got a surprise for you. And then they see Puli-Rula, and then they usually ask me to leave their house. But this game is bonkers. You play as like two children from the 1900s trying to fight their way through kind of what it looks like would happen if you described the plot of Little Nemo the Dream Master to a bunch of high college students and just let them figure it out. It's got ridiculous digitized backgrounds. It's incredibly colorful. It's of a very sort of like that era of like Japanese game studio sort of sense of like creativity and weirdness that you got stuff like honest to God, I would kind of put it alongside stuff like Parodius or Cho Aniki, just as far as sort of like vibe or spirit, not so much gameplay, right? But like there's like human beings that pop up in the backgrounds, or sometimes you're just like walking endlessly through a castle or a clock tower, and then like you're fighting huge-nosed like fairy demons, and it's the weirdest thing I'd seen in a long time. I didn't obviously I never played it in the arcades. I found out about it way later because of Retronauts and would try it on like emulators. It is weird, but not in like an unplayable way. Like it's a perfectly fine beat 'em up. It's just every time you get to a new screen, you're going to look at something and think, what am I looking at? What is this?
Yeah, real quick. Welcome
It's a
to the
great
stream
example too.
to Brandon and Andrew. Glad
Hey.
you guys join us.
Hello to both of you.
And
Andrew is actually someone I brought on board. Very good man, if I do say so. He likes to hear me get very feverishly excited about babbling about the games I like, so
oh,
I thought this would be up his alley.
and Brandon's a regular commenter on the Dyer and Betty channel. So, but now you were saying, James?
Oh, I couldn't hear you there.
That
Oh, could you say that again?
you were saying? We were talking about.
Oh no, I was just saying, Pulilura. That I mean, it's just ridiculously insane fun, but it does have a great engine behind it.
Yeah.
That's the thing about it. There are a lot of games out there. It's like, oh, we're gonna do crazy, wacky stuff, but you try to play it, you can't see it because you'll never get to it because you're not gonna keep playing. But that game, it just keeps you in there. You can't really say that about too many strange games.
That is a great point. Yeah, it's like you could take the exact same like mechanics and like character behavior and put it into just like a very regular like inner city denim vest beat 'em up, and it would still be fine, right? It would work perfectly.
Exactly.
It would do what you want. Pulirula really kind of the reason it stands out so much is just because of how bonkers it is.
I still can't get past that whole bit where you see the legs coming out and there's a door right between the two of them.
Yeah, it's like that building in San Francisco, except you're a 10-year-old in the 1900s fighting pixies.
Exactly.
I think in some interview somewhere they admitted that was one of the developers.
Yeah, it sounds
So
right.
that makes the game even more weird, but
Yeah.
that's why you love it though.
How about you, Mike? Weird Brawlers.
Yeah, there is one I would love to mention that is actually a really, really, really damn good game in addition to being totally whacked out there. I'd say it's even a top 10er. That would be Ninja Baseball Batman.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But I have to say it Batman because it has absolutely nothing to do with Batman, the DC superhero. It's not Batman Forever, the arcade game. No, it is called Batman because the playable characters are four. Well, they're not actually men. They seem to be robots or at least cyborgs, but they all use baseball bats as weapons. They actually use them a bit more like actual ninja-esque weapons. Like the smaller one, Twin Bat's Rhino, he wields two smaller bats like Twin Kunai or Kodachi or what have you. But they're ninja robots who are very proficient in fighting with their bats against enemies that are giant baseballs, large catcher's mitts, umpire guards, and so forth. The game is rather committed to its theme, except that it only sticks to baseball-esque enemies for so long. I mean, I think like baseballs are your basic guys, the Breads and Dougs and what have you, but then the enemy designs get a lot wackier. Like, the first boss you fight is a large anthropomorphic plane that you fight within a gigantic plane. It's Planeception, more or less. What else is there? Squids, slot machines. I know one of the bosses, one of the biggest pains in the butt was a gigantic a poltergeist using a buffalo trophy head and all sorts of shit cobbled together. And one boss is a giant dog with a machine gun just called makeshift villain for some reason. This game just does whatever the hell it wants, and I love it for it. But in addition to just being one of the most colorful and energetic and fervent games I've ever seen, it also plays extremely damn well. I mean, Irem has made generally good beat-em-ups. They made 4 of them for the arcades, and Blade Master, then Hook, then Undercover Cops, and then finally Ninja Baseball Batman. I think each one is better than the last one. They're all very much worth playing, but if you only have to play one, I would go with NBBM. So
There you go. That's a great game.
Also, shout out to a recent Kickstarter where someone just made a Ninja Baseball Batman comic. I got my copy. I haven't read it yet, but I was so happy it existed.
I remember that, yeah.
Yep, written by Dave Cook, the writer of Beatdowns Per Minute.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Nice.
I was going to mention that if you heard me typing, I was trying to get more information to make sure I had everything correct, so I didn't mess up his name or the name of the other comic that he does.
Hell yeah.
But it's a great read though. I was expecting to have to move before I would get the comics, so I didn't get any of the physical rewards. Then I ended up not moving, so now I'm just going to be bitter about it. But I read the digital version of it, and it is definitely fun, and it just hammers on the fact that this should have been a cartoon, a toy line, and everything back in the 90s.
God, yes. No, now I'm even more excited to actually crack it open. I really want to check this out now.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking as far as like the weirdness, I have to give a nod to Growls just because, like I said earlier in the stream, you've got stuff like elephants attacking tanks and Indiana Jones wannabes and clone posers from outer space, and that's just weird. And but I'd have to say the one I like the most is actually a console exclusive. It is the UFO Yakisoba game for the Super Famicom.
Yeah, I know of that one. I'm not sure if I've actually played it.
It's
a trip.
Yes, it is totally true. It's based on a line of Japanese ramen commercials. And it's like when you beat every boss, you see him do this because you play this. What are the Super Sentai characters? Basically, that's what their mascot is. And he'll just like shoot off all this ramen from his hands, like he's doing a Street Fighter move, and wrap up the boss in ramen noodles. So it's like the power of ramen compels you. And he rides on a unicycle, and his car looks like a ramen pasta bowl. And it's just so out there. And his arch enemy is a dude that wears a kettle on his head. His name is Kettler. Yeah, I strongly recommend anyone who can check that out. Do it. It's not a hard game, but it is definitely a memorable one. No question about that. Mm-hmm. All right. Now we get to the starting to get into the meat of this now. Let's talk about licensed brawlers.
Yeah.
Whoops.
We have at least one representative here on screen, which would be Bart Simpson. But, we got so many we could cover, but we should probably limit it to just a few. So...
And I think that's a good point, because I think it's kind of funny how many properties back in the day got turned into beat-em-ups, right? It was... Mm-hmm. It was almost sort of the, like, generic 3D action game of its time. It just in the sense that, like, hey, we spent a ton of money to turn Batman Returns into something. What do you got? Yeah. In a lot of cases, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like, I think whoever had the idea to turn The Simpsons into a brawler needs to have been given, like, free reign of Konami as a corporation, because they did such a good job. Yeah. You take stuff like, Turtles or whatever, and it's like, well, what else is this going to be?
Huh. Boy, we found
exactly. That is a great point. And I mean, people have memories for that beat 'em up that are just as strong as sitting around watching the cartoon or playing with the Playmates toy line from back in the like back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Oh, exactly. Like, honest to God, I kind of knew about Turtles as being like a video game first, right? Like, I was aware of the cartoon and stuff, but I never really watched it. But then, as soon as the arcade machines started showing up around me, I played the crap out of them to the point where now, anytime I think about Turtles, it's like, oh yeah, those are the guys from those Konami beat 'em ups I really liked.
So if you
That's how good they were.
Yeah, exactly.
and if you look at it, you've got the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you've got Simpsons, X-Men, Asterix for any Eurocentric arcade players. And would anyone count Bucky O'Hare in the arcade as a brawler, or?
It's close.
The arcade,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that's a beat 'em up, and it's fine. I know people kind of don't like that game. I think it's fine.
Yeah.
It's a beat 'em up in the same sense that Data East RoboCop 2 is also kind of sort of. I mean, they're both. I mean, they both have renegade controls. One button fires left, the other fires right, so that kind of counts, I guess. maybe.
That is true.
Yeah.
And they punch if you're up close, so kind of.
And
I mean, you're beating them up.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's with lasers, sometimes it's with hands and feet.
That's
you
true.
know.
That's true.
And
But
Well,
it still
shoot, now
it still
it's-
gives you that same feeling of a beat 'em up, so might as well count it.
and
See, now it
yeah.
sounds like Gunstar Heroes might be my favorite beat 'em up.
Valid. Mhm.
Hi, Song is here.
It's a good one.
Evening, Song. Welcome to the chat.
Hey, song. What up?
And Sharon, for the record, that is also not the kind of game we're talking about. That's a one-on-one fighter.
Still good.
But she mentioned the Turtles game a little while ago, so maybe we
Yes.
could talk about that a bit more. Just how much they did a great job of translating the feel of the toys and the cartoon into the games itself.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
they definitely did. I mean, I remember.
No, that's absolutely true.
I had seen the cartoon. I hadn't really seen the toys. I'd seen the cartoon when I first encountered the arcade game right around, say, 90 or so. I recognized everything. It's like there's Bebop, there's Rocksteady, there's Shredder, there's Baxter Stockman, the little Mousers, even those robots that drill up from underground and shoot things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. I was honestly just about to say the exact same thing. Like, there is stuff about Turtles that I did not know about until I got to them in the video game, right? Like, who's this big bug dude? This is crazy.
Mm-hmm. And Turtles in Time, that was one of those games where I know there was an arcade sequel, but I didn't play it in the arcade until a few years after I played the Super NES game. And I remember finding that for the first time and just going, wow, they got really close with the Super Nintendo version.
Amazingly close.
They did. It is impressive, even for like good conversions of the era, right? Like that one was on a whole other level.
Yeah, but
Now,
that's
I
get
say
on
this
board.
as somebody who thinks Hyperstone Heist is great, right? So maybe I'm the wrong dude to ask.
Right,
No,
it's great.
no, that's valid. Yeah. No,
Hey,
That's not a bad game to me anyway.
Oh. One of my
No.
favorite memories of Turtles games is my junior year of high school. A friend of mine that I sat with in a science class brought in a Nomad one day, the day before Christmas break. And we sat in the back of the class playing through Hyperstone Heist on like mute while the teacher just made everyone watch a movie. And it was then that I realized that if you're playing a beat 'em up with somebody who's good at beat 'em ups, these games are like half an hour long.
Yep.
And of course, we all played The Simpsons in the arcade.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
I was baffled why that didn't get like a home console release. I believe there was a weird like Commodore 64 version at one point.
Mm-hmm.
You could probably,
I'm pretty sure it had some.
you could
Oh, I'm
probably-
so sorry. What?
You could probably blame Acclaim for that. They had the home license for The Simpsons. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's how that stuff used to separate back in the day. Could you imagine having that problem now? Right, like
yeah.
Squaresoft, like, well, we can make a console game for the Avengers, but some other company gets to make like the PC game and the arcade game, right? Like it's such a like 90s licensing issue to run into. Yeah, okay, maybe the DOS port was what I would think of, or maybe it was on both. I didn't have either of them. I only ever saw this in arcades, which is why I was so deeply relieved when it came to the Xbox 360 way later.
I remember hearing about a DOS port, but I don't remember hearing any other version of it though.
I could be wrong. Yeah, this is all secondhand knowledge. As far as I was concerned, it only existed as an arcade game until way later in life for me.
Oh, same here. I didn't hear about that until I got on the internet. I just remember.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you hear there's a DOS port. It's like somebody got it.
Yeah, and I was even playing PC games at the time, right? It's like, man, I could have had The Simpsons at my house. Like, what are you doing to me, Konami?
Well, you know, it's lucky I just happen to have the book I mentioned at the top of the stream sitting right here, which, for those of you that missed it, was Hardcore Gaming 101's The Guide to Beat 'em Ups, Volume 1, which is very much worth reading. And there is a chapter on The Simpsons in it, and it says here Arcade, Commodore 64, and IBM PC.
Woo!
Oh, there you go.
IBM PC. What a phrase of that era.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you hear that, you're transported right back to that time because that's what you saw in the little sticker on the box.
Yes.
I'm 6 years old, standing in Software Etc., trying to ask my dad if Sam and Max would run on the computer we got at home.
Oh.
But, regarding other licensed brawlers, there was the X-Men.
Very good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can I bring up something interesting about that?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Please
Some
do.
people probably already know this, but there was a pilot for an X-Men cartoon back around 1989, and I happened to catch it on what was called the Marvel Action Universe. It was a syndicated show that used to play usually in the mornings. They would show reruns of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, or just a regular Spider-Man cartoon, and I don't want to get in. That's a whole other tangent.
Yeah.
Because it was a different series, not the 60s Spider-Man, the 80s Spider-Man. They show RoboCop and Dino Riders. But then and then on one Friday, all of a sudden, there's this group singing about the X-Men. And I'm like, wait, there's an X-Men cartoon? And that video game that you see, that's what the cartoon looked like. If you search on YouTube for Pride of the X-Men with a Y instead of an I because it's about Kitty Pryde, the girl that's with Professor X when you see in the cut screens.
X-Men, go
There's
and
a
save the city.
There's a 22-minute pilot episode of that cartoon that we never got. And all those designs, except for some bonus characters, they come straight out of that version. And it was that was based on more the late 70s, early 80s X-Men books by Chris Claremont and John Byrne around the time of the Phoenix Saga. And even during the credits, you see comic panels from those books in the background of the credits.
You know, I remember seeing
This
that
is blowing my
for sale
mind.
on VHS.
Oh yeah, that's where most people saw it later on, because when I saw it on TV, I never saw an ad for it. It just happened to be on. And I just remember, what the heck did I just see? Is it coming on next week? Waited next week, no show.
Hey, I never saw the pilot, but was this the one where Wolverine sounded incredibly Australian for some reason?
Yeah, that's probably because no one could think of what a threatening Canadian sounded like at that point.
Very ironically, hilariously predicting Hugh Jackman about a decade plus later. But yeah.
And plus, you hear a bunch of different stories about what they were going to do with Wolverine early on, including the weird idea that he was going to turn out to be a mutated Wolverine and not a mutated human. And they actually hinted at that at the real early issues of Uncanny X-Men when the new team pops up.
Oh my fucking god! They need to acknowledge this in modern comics. That's
This
gold.
delights me. I'm
Yes.
so excited about this. Oh my god.
Yes.
And it's an idea that's so insane they almost did it twice, because they almost did that with Spider-Woman in the comics.
Oh,
That-
that
Je-
one I could
like
actually
Jessica
kind of
Drew?
buy.
Yeah, Jessica Drew,
Yeah.
when they weren't really sure about her origin, one of the ideas that she was going to turn out to be a mutated spider, and I guess that's probably why she gave certain people the heebie-jeebies when she was around them.
This is all starting to sound too much like Peter Porker.
Some of this stuff, those Marvel Masterpiece trade paperbacks.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
know
they
of them.
mentioned some of that stuff in some of those. If you ever get a chance to read
Wow.
those, but you can usually catch this stuff in random interviews and stuff. But prior to the X-Men, it became a favorite of mine because we never got that cartoon based on that specific style because Toei Doga did the animation. It just looks ridiculously nice.
Yeah.
We never got that show, but we got that game. So that's a nice consolation prize.
We got something, right? God, now I
Yeah.
super want to track this down just because Toei friggin' rules. Toei did a lot of like later era Transformers animation while it was kind of winding down in Japan, and it's all beautiful. And of course, Toei owning it is why half of it's not on DVD, but that's a talk for another stream.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I did see we had some mentions in the chat about a Transformers game, and I do want to shout out that there's a game called Transformers Devastation, which is my
Oh, yeah.
favorite game of all time because it's literally Bayonetta, except sometimes you're a truck.
That's a pretty
Good
good
choice.
description.
I love every single thing Platinum has ever made. I'm staring at a wall covered in Transformers right now, so the fact that Devastation exists and wasn't just some like NyQuil-induced fever dream I had is a great source of consolation in these trying times.
Yeah, it's a valid game too, and I would go on the record to say the greatest Transformers game ever made as well.
It's my favorite. Like, we got real lucky starting with like the PS2 era as far as getting like actually good Transformers games. None of them are beat 'em ups other than Devastation, so it's not particularly germane to the stream. But like Transformers games got really good for a while in the 2000s, which is weird because I don't know if y'all ever played Mystery of Convoy for the Famicom.
Oh, Jesus Christ,
I own
no.
that.
It was the I own a complete. It's one of two complete in box Famicom games I own, and it was the first game I ever emulated because I found out there was a Transformers game I couldn't play. I hate it.
Yep.
But no, going back to the idea of a Transformers beat 'em up, there was a allegedly, I don't even want to say canceled because that would imply it got farther into development than it did. But according to some Capcom employees, apparently there were some Capcom employees that really liked Transformers that were going to try to put some ideas together to go for the Transformers license back in. This would have been during like Generation 2 in the early mid-90s. And the fact that never happened breaks my heart because I could only imagine how it would have turned out.
Yeah,
It's
you're hurting me with this information because
Yeah.
I mean my nickname on my online alias is PrimeOp. I mean, you know
Yeah.
what that comes from.
Yeah, see, you get it. You get it.
The idea that there would have been a Capcom Transformers beat 'em up. Man.
Or
Yeah.
anything, right? I would have settled for like a Transformers one-on-one fighter because Capcom would have like imagine that on CPS. Too, right? Good
We
Lord.
did get that on the. Oh no, wait, that was Power Rangers. Shit, never mind.
It was Power Rangers,
I'll shut
unfortunately. Now, to be fair, I used to play that Super Nintendo game Vortex and just pretend it was a Transformers game because it's largely the same thing, right?
Valid.
I've also confused games with Transformers, but I was doing it intentionally as a deluded young man.
Oh yeah, Animated Taco said, "Don't let Dipod hear about this." Dipod is an incredible artist and animator who is crazy about Transformers and has done some incredible Transformers pixel art.
I have at least
And
one thing in common already with them, and I want to see their work now.
Nice.
And he's done some Transformers fan animation too. I mean, everything he does just looks incrable.
Oh,
Nice.
So
Yeah,
he just said, Taco said, "Don't let him hear about it." So
Listen,
yeah.
I promise I'll keep this secret with me, but now I am gonna have to track down some of their stuff because I'm super curious. Like those are two things that are very relevant to my interests.
Yeah,
Indeed.
You will not be disappointed.
sweet. But now going on about licensed games for a little bit here. Yeah, we've hit most of the big ones by Konami. Then you got the stuff by Capcom. I mean, we got The Punisher,
Love that one.
Yeah.
Very good.
and then what has to probably be the most offbeat licensed one I never expected. That was Cadillacs and Dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Friggin'
I'd
rules for
Great
no
example.
reason.
Yeah, I'd wager that not a lot of people knew that it was actually a licensed title based on the pulpy comic book series Xenozoic Tales. But it is too bad it is a license and will thus probably run into a lot of problems being released on modern stuff. Same thing for the Punisher, because those two and Alien vs. Predator are actually my top 3 favorite Capcom beat 'em ups, and I have to resort to MAME if I want to play those, which kind of blows, but oh well.
I don't want to instill anybody with false hope, but I used to think that about the Simpsons arcade game, and that at least got an arcade 1-up release.
Right. You did say this earlier, my bad.
Well, but I'm just saying Disney owns all 3 of these things, so I do think it's possible that, like, one day, because it did sneak back out on that weird Capcom logo stick. There's got to be a better way to put that. But they're like Disney's clearly not completely against the idea of remembering that they had games from the 90s, or maybe I'm just saying that as somebody who relishes the fact that I can still go on the internet and legally buy a copy of Dark Forces, right? So maybe one day, if they promise to maybe slightly redraw the Dutch sprite so Arnie doesn't come sniffing, like maybe we can get Alien vs. Predator for like Switch.
It just make him bald. Boom. Totally original.
I mean,
Exactly.
just the fact that we even got action figure from NECA,
Yes!
including
I forgot
Lin,
about that.
there's an official Lin Kurosawa action figure. That
yes.
blows my mind.
Very nice.
They could never get her back in the games, but they got an action figure of her, so there's still hope out there.
I am not as up on my Alien canon as I would like, or at least people tell me I'm not up on my Alien canon because I think Alien Resurrection is a good movie, actually. But I think Lin Kurosawa comes back in like some of the comics later or something, and I remember being very excited to learn this.
Yeah, I have no idea what happened with that. That's something I really need to get into, or both the Alien and the Predator and the team up comics that Dark Horse put out, because from what I heard, it's just nothing but quality.
Yes, yeah, I can vouch for that. As far as the other licensed ones, the ones that intrigued me the most that I don't think I ever got to play more than a handful of times, if that, was Capcom's Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Brawlers.
Those are great. Oh, I love those.
They remind me a little bit of the King of Dragons, which I played the hell out of.
Yeah, they've got kind of that Knights of the Round King of Dragons thing happening, but like they're a lot deeper, and they actually have like D&D lore in them, and the existence of those just delights me. And those are kind of fun too.
Did we just lose Tim?
Yeah, he just
okay.
very abruptly cut out.
We'll give him a
I
minute.
swear-
He should be back.
Okay.
There he is.
I managed to kick the headphone jack out of my computer because I was so excited about the ADD. You guys, I'm sorry.
It's cool.
It's all right, but
Feel that.
I rolled a natural 20 on me disconnecting my headset.
Nerd.
Like the oh no, I'm gonna get beat up.
I'm sorry, I've had to.
I should have had a Millhouse sprite. But like the D&D ones are, I've always been really fascinated by those because those came so like comparatively late in the existence of kind of the traditional beat 'em up, right? Like we're still, those came out at a point where I think we already had like primarily 3D home consoles, and we were really kind of moving away from traditional 2D stuff. And then Capcom was like, "No, damn it, we have this D&D license."
And then they even released the two of them on the Saturn, but only in Japan.
The list of arcade games that only came out on the Saturn in Japan that I wish I owned is as long as like a decent sized house, right? Like the fact that the Switch gives me the chance to play Elevator Action Returns in a legal capacity continues to like rock me.
I'll tell you something.
Understandably so.
I actually
Right?
had a copy of that in my hands at one point. I almost bought
yes.
it, but I didn't have. I think you had to have the 4 meg cart to run it,
That sounds right.
and I didn't have that, and I didn't actually know exactly what they were. This was before I knew more about them. Also, I see zombies in the stream, so welcome aboard, zombie. But
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the D&D games came so late. They're so late. They're in the CPS2 development cycle instead of the CPS1 engine stuff like Final Fight,
God, that is bonkers.
Captain Commando, and That is, and there's Alien versus Predator, Battle Circuit, and the Dungeons and Dragons games. Those are the beat 'em up, the few beat 'em ups that are in CPS2, so they benefit from that.
Battle
that
Circuit
stronger-
friggin' rules too.
Actually,
Oh man, that game is nuts, and it's it's like you said, you love Captain Commando. It's almost like more Captain Commando.
Yeah, it's very similar energy, right? It's just having fun making a beat 'em up. Yeah.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, Armored Warriors was also CPS2.
Oh, I love
I think
Armored
that
Warriors
is too.
Well, we could just pretend that Armored Warriors was the Transformers beat 'em up, right? There's
Yes.
a big red one. It's close enough.
Yes, you actually do get like mech fusion powers if you're playing more than one character. So
Yeah, perfect.
there is that. Yeah,
Perfect.
Wasn't that a prequel to Cyberbots? Or is it a sequel?
yeah. That was the predecessor. Yes, Cyberbots is technically kind of the sequel. Yes,
Yeah, like I think like some of the mechs show up again or something.
I think it was all four of them, like three
Yeah.
different variations of each one. And some of the bosses were, well, the actual bosses in Cyberbots as well. So.
Yeah, that's... I actually played Cyberbots extensively when my friend Andre bought the import for
Wow.
PS1.
Nice.
Really?
Game
Really?
rules.
I thought you weren't big on fighters, Rob.
I wasn't, but Andre was. He was the...
Fair.
It's got robots. That doesn't count. It's different.
Yeah, well, he's like... we saw it, and he's like, this looks like Street Fighter with robots. It's like, okay, I'm kind of interested in checking this out now. You're going to buy it, right? Meanwhile...
No,
You
that's
see, that works out. That works out in some cases. It works out with something like Cyberbots, and not really with Rise of the Robots.
let's not talk about that.
I wanted to like Rise of the Robots because I'm a huge fan of Queen, but like, there's nothing that can save that game.
Nope.
Yeah. I think even Brian May's involvement was overblown somehow. Like, he really only contributed like one riff to one song or something. I forget exactly what, but it was major false advertising.
So I have one of Brian May's solo albums from the 90s, and there is definitely a song called Rise of the Robots where he explains to you the plot of Rise of the Robots in
Dear
song
God.
form. And the fact
Jesus
that
Christ.
exists. The fact that exists makes Rise of the Robots worth it, right? Like, it's not a fun game, but at one point, the other guy from Queen had to sing the phrase "Rise, Robot, Rise" in a song that he received money for.
Wow.
Man, that's
Holy
That's
crap.
bad.
The
Hey,
90s were very fucking weird, and I kind of miss them.
If anybody here watching or involved in this stream knows the developers of Rise of the Robots, and they need somebody to make a much cheaper song for the inevitable Rise of the Robots HD remake, you get a hold of me and I'll make it happen. This is my end game now. Rise of the Robots 2.
Wow, Snarb read the novelization, and it's not bad, apparently.
There was a novelization. Oh, we got to get off of Rise of the Robots here.
Yeah, we're talking about it too much, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Licensed games. Superheroes are rather common. In fact, there were 4 Marvel games in the arcades back in the 90s. We already mentioned X-Men. We already mentioned The Punisher. There was also Sega's Spider-Man.
Yes.
And also Data East Captain America and the Avengers.
a
which
favorite of mine.
Yeah, I really like that one too. I remember actually playing it in the arcade when I was like, I don't know, 7 or something, and somehow I got into the end boss of the first stage, Whirlwind, on 1 credit. I believe I was playing as Iron Man, and I somehow got him cornered and caught him in a loop, which I drained almost nearly all his health with doing that, just repeatedly getting cornered there. Then for some reason, I tried a different strategy to finish him off, and then he killed me, and then I cried and walked away from the machine. I was really heartbroken I snatched defeat from the jaws of victory, and my little old heart couldn't take it. So
You will be the one.
We don't
to
mean
save
to
it.
laugh at your tears, but we're
No,
laughing at your tears.
it's
laughing with
very
you.
laughable. It's valid. It's valid.
Yeah, we can identify with it.
Yeah, exactly.
We identify with your pain.
I would
Yes,
say-
but
I got one thing to say about that game.
yes.
Vision's walk cycle in that game is hysterical. I had a,
Yeah.
I've never actually played. I was going to talk about Spider-Man because I've played that, but I've never actually played this one. What's up with Vision?
Okay, let me set this up for you. A few years back, I'd taken my oldest daughter out for her birthday to the mall. They had a game store opened up there. My youngest stepdaughter and my stepson had come with us. And my stepdaughter, big Marvel fan. And she was really getting heavy into the Avengers and whatnot. I mean, I've showed her these games since, but at this video game store, they actually had Captain America and the Avengers. And then I remembered the walk cycle, and I was like, Nat, you got to see this. You just watch. And she watches. And what he does is he folds his arms, and he like runs around on his tiptoes. She almost fell over.
He's so serious. Oh my goodness.
Yep.
You just look up a video and
back
see
when back when that happened, it was right when what they called well, they didn't call him that, but you could call it rebooted Vision, where basically he was. I'm trying to think how much backstory should I go into.
Well, to bring it kind of in line with people who know more of the MCU stuff, if anyone's seen WandaVision, it's what happened to Vision at the end.
It's pretty close to that. So what happened was his whole personality was rebooted, and a lot of the personality that he gained over the years was basically gone. So he was a bit more serious. He wasn't really very human-like, but as you could see over the years, he would get back there.
Yeah.
But at that point, he was the guy who would probably walk like that.
And we are all the better for it.
Yeah, it's pretty fitting. I actually thought White Vision was the default Vision because of this game. I have to admit, for as much as I like comics-based media, I know very, very little about the actual comic books themselves, so most of what I get is from video games and movies and TV, so that's how much of a faker I am.
No, that's how a lot of people got their start from. I mean, I got my start. They had there was a show on Channel 53 WPGH from Pittsburgh.
Ooh.
They took all the segments from the 1960s Grand Trey Lawrence Marvel comics, the ones that look like they just cut and pasted panels and moved them and stuff, but they had incredible voices and music. They took those. They took Filmation's 1960s DC cartoons, and then they took parts from Hanna-Barbera's Super Adventures and mixed it all into one show. And just
very cool.
That was like my afternoon addiction when I was a toddler, and that's what got me into comic books. So the idea that they would use these licensed video games to get people into the comics. I mean, Marvel superheroes, it did more for some of those non-X-Men characters than Marvel was trying to do themselves at the point.
Yeah.
Because if you weren't the X-Men or Spider-Man, you really didn't matter that much in the 90s.
Yeah, to think that back in the 90s, Iron Man was a B-tier superhero. Can you fathom that nowadays?
Nope.
Yeah, and he had his own cartoon in the 60s. I mean, you hear it sampled in Ghostface Killer's albums when they're talking about Tony Stark. That's where that comes from. Those Grand Trey Lawrence cartoons.
Very nice.
But over time, it basically became the big three were basically Spider-Man, Hulk, and Captain America. And then once you hit the 90s, it's basically Spider-Man, X-Men, and then these other idiots we own and don't really care about.
Yeah.
And it took not having the movie rights for them to actually say, hey, you know what? Let's do something with these characters. But the video games these licensed games help keep them alive for some people. That's where they know Iron Man from. So, superior tech.
Yeah,
when he wins around.
Yeah, not to mention, every comics-based media that isn't comics is basically a gateway drug, a very freaking potential gateway drug. And yet, I still haven't really gotten into the big comics themselves. But maybe someday.
You want to hear what my entrance was into this stuff?
Sure.
It wasn't the comics. It wasn't video games. It was a board game that came out in the mid-70s, which was like a game of concentration, except it was all Superman and Super Friends characters.
Wow.
I've seen that.
Yeah, we had that. And it was like, flip it over Clark Kent, flip it over Lex Luthor. Oh, nah, reset. Flip it over Jimmy Olsen, flip it over Batman. You know,
I
basically.
mean, they had some obscure characters in that.
Yeah, they did. I mean, some I don't even remember. I'm sure I've heard of them. But getting on.
Does that include Arm Fall Off Boy?
Uh,
I'm not sure if he existed yet.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Oh yeah, I think it was an '80s creation. You're right. Never mind.
But gaming wise, though, for me, it was Superman on the Atari 2600. Which, while not a brawler, it's. Yeah, we should probably go ahead and get off this tangent and get back onto the brawlers.
Yeah, Tim wanted to talk about Sega's Spider-Man for the arcade, right?
Yes.
Yeah, just for a second, just because I've actually played that. There's an arcade near me that has the cabinet for it. That game is beautiful. I remember being shocked by like some of the animations. Like, it is way nicer looking than I expected.
Yeah, same thing. I found it once in somewhere, and it was like, wow, this is one amazing looking Spider-Man game. And
It's so good.
Snarb asked about Taito's Superman game. It was more of a one-plane brawler, like we were talking about with like Kung Fu Master.
Mm-hmm.
But it was still a good game.
I don't
Yeah,
remember
And
this at all.
and
Wow.
it still felt like a beat 'em up when you were playing it. They back when our arcade was still at the Eastwood Mall. They used to have Superman and Double Dragon next to each other. So if I couldn't get on one, I'd play the other one.
Mm-hmm.
And that was me getting my fighting fix there. But that was a really great licensed game.
And one of the arcades,
Even though there were no other Superman related characters in it,
yeah,
it was still a lot of fun. People had fun with it.
I remember one of the arcades I used to go to in Daytona actually had that. I
Nice.
think they had it sitting pretty close to the Ninja Warriors.
Yeah, pretty much that and the 2600 Soups are really the only good two Superman games to ever exist, sadly, so...
I can't argue.
Don't tell that to a guy that I used to work with who used to rent the Superman Returns game for 360 just to get more achievement points. That's the most 2006 sentence I've said in a while.
Wait, was that the one where the city of Metropolis was the life bar?
Yes, and I think that's actually kind of a neat idea.
That is really an awesome and novel idea that I wish was in a better game.
Right, exactly, because it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where it's like, hey, Sunsoft made a Superman game. Great, I can get punched 3 times. I'm Superman, yay.
Yeah, that one, the Genesis Superman really should have been better than what it was, but textbook example of Superman being pussified, like I said earlier with Death and Return of Superman. He should not be able to be shot by drones or whatever, unless they're kryptonite lasers, which, okay, maybe they are, but it's still bullshit. Anyway.
And BL85, we do not talk about Superman 64, sorry.
Yeah, let's not.
Superman 64 ruined one of my best friend's birthday parties growing up. I was personally insulted by this game.
Oh, shit. Bogus.
I think we need to actually really get to the meat of things now, which would be the all-time classic brawlers. The ones that everybody knows. And we've already touched on a few of them. Yeah, Streets of Rage has come up numerous times. Final Fight, Double Dragon. But then you got other stuff like Golden Axe. And...
Great one.
Let's see. And don't forget the arcade sequel, Revenge of Death Adder.
Love
Revenge of Death
one.
Adder is fantastic. There's a arcade in Ann Arbor, Michigan that has that, and it is beautiful. That is a great looking game still.
Yeah. I think I actually did see a cabinet of it once at the at an arcade that was near a college, which is long closed, but it had some good stuff in there, and I think that was one of them. Unfortunately, I don't think I played it then. Stupid me.
Funny enough,
I never got to see it in a while, though.
Oh, that sucks.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Great game if you get a chance. Canceled Saturn port I remember hearing about, which is a real bummer.
Bogus.
We got Golden Axe the Duel instead of Revenge of Death Adder.
Yeah. And then we got
that's
Golden
a
Axe
letdown.
2008 instead of Revenge of Death Adder.
Where's the justice in that?
Jesus Christ.
Um, so as far as like the big ones, I would also like to throw out there, just I think it kind of largely got big through like this through early emulation and internet fan discussion, but I think River City Ransom is one that a lot of people are familiar with these days.
Oh yeah.
Barf.
Oh, it's definitely gotten back up there thanks to River City
River
Girls.
City Girls.
Oh yeah, River City
It's a
Girls
really
is
fun one.
fantastic.
Yes, love
River,
it.
River City Ransom, and it was hard. I never saw it in a store, but I got to rent it, and I rented it a lot.
Nice.
Back
Oh.
I mean, that's still one of my all-time favorite games right there. I mean, that was, and it's funny that it's so cartoony, but you can do things that you can't do in serious games, like leave the screen with your weapon.
Right.
Yeah.
Or like carry food with you.
And I just
Have
remember
an
thinking, why
inventory.
can't more serious games do these things that River City Ransom was able to do easily? And even the drone enemies were sneaky. They wouldn't just walk up to you. Sometimes they just kind of post up in a corner for a bit and wait for a second, adjust themselves, and then come down at an angle and attack you.
Oh yeah, or you get rushed
You had to be-
constantly. Like dudes in that game are as fast as you are, and that never happens.
Yeah, and you had to be careful in that game.
Now, Brandon asked earlier in the chat if any of us had played the X68000 version of River City Ransom. Yeah, I never.
I've only seen
Sadly.
pictures of it.
Sadly, no.
Because I'm gonna go ahead and assume that it's very good looking as an X68000 game,
It looks
but
like
I've not actually played it.
looks like
I just saw that it had like cuts. I just saw it had like cutscene graphics, and since I can't read Japanese, I couldn't tell what they were saying. But it just made me interested. I wanted to see more of it, though.
Yeah, I bet that's fantastic. I want to track that down now. Man, I love how many weird PC ports so many of these games we're talking about got. It's not really a platform
Especially
you
on
think
that
of for.
system.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's not really a platform you think of for beat 'em ups. Especially not back at the time, right? Like these days, obviously, it's a different story. But a lot of computers couldn't even scroll back in the day, so I couldn't imagine what it would have been like trying to play one of these on it.
Yeah. Now, BL85 Gamer also said we got to touch on the best 8-bit beat 'em up, Mighty Final Fight.
Mighty Final
Great
Fight
game.
is so good.
Underrated.
Excellent.
Absolutely
It's very
fantastic
underrated.
game. Another
And
one I
it's- I was about to say,
No, go ahead,
it's
please,
funny
Dan.
that it's funny that a bunch of the stuff from that game, some of the attacks, show up in later Final Fight games.
right, they knew what gold they had. Like, man, we got to let the Super Nintendo kids get in on this.
Yeah.
Mighty Final Fight is absolutely fantastic. Mighty Final Fight is actually the first time I played a Final Fight game. That was another one of those super late NES games that my mom got me from Blockbuster back in the day. So I
Great.
remember seeing a magazine ad for it back when Capcom was doing those like full page red border ads, and I remember thinking, why do these guys have such big heads? This looks funny. And then it turned out to be totally sick.
Yeah, it is by and far better than the SNES port of Final Fight. Hell, I didn't say it's better than Final Fight 2. Better than 3, though? I don't know. 3 is really goddamn good.
3 is one that I actually really got into recently. In fact, I played through it for
Yeah.
the first time the other day.
I
Oh,
gotta
it's
play
so
those. I
great.
know people like them. I might have briefly played 2 back in the day, but I know I've never played 3, and y'all are not the first people to speak highly of it to me, so now I'm super curious.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
like
sure.
part 2 and 3.
Go ahead, Prime.
Oh no, that's it. I just wanted to throw out there. I like 2 and 3. That's it.
Okay.
So go ahead with what you were saying.
Oh yeah, 2 is quite good for what it is. It was sort of a mea culpa for how crappily the SNES port of FF1 turned out, and it does allow for 2 players, and it has a pretty neat world tour theme to it. You start out in Hong Kong, go to France, Italy, etc. It does maybe feel a little bit too derivative of the original arcade game, and not with quite as much zest either, but it is still fun for what it's worth, and it did give us the quite rad Maki Ginryusai, the blonde ninja girl who is, I think she was a guy's protege, and
I think she was accused of ripping off my Shiranui when she like popped up in Capcom versus SNK 2, but
Yeah.
Well,
that's
considering what SNK did in Burning Fight, Capcom kind of owed them.
Yeah.
that's fair. That's totally fair.
Because that guy in Burning Fight even has his neutral jump kick pose.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yes, I guess it was kind of a Dan Hibiki situation, but Maki wasn't jokey, so.
Sometimes it seems like they're trying to show, we can do this better than you. Like, okay, oh yeah, well here's a character that's going to do it better, and it's kind of like a back and
No, I can't.
Like
yes, I can.
back
No,
and
you
forth.
can't. Yes, you can.
There you go.
Yeah, but Final Fight 3 is extremely good. Basically, it's Final Fight by way of Streets of Rage 2 or 3. Like, every character has a sort of like fighting game-esque command moves, and every character also has a super move that they can perform after they've done some after they've beaten up some enemies enough. Everyone can dash as well. It even has an alternate route in it where you just skip one stage and go to another entirely different one if you do a certain thing in stage 3, as I recall. And
Yeah, there's a part where when you're fighting at the bus stop, you have to be careful not to break the sign, because if you break the sign, the bus won't show up.
Indeed.
I mean, that's pretty
I know
cool.
that.
This delights me. Oh my god.
I forget, if you break the sign, is that considered the normal route where you fight Kane?
I don't know which one's considered the normal or the alternate route. There's a
I forget.
I forget which version of it has a debug menu in it. And there's some kind of level selector there. Maybe if I looked at that, maybe that might say what's the real route and what's the alternate route. But
yeah, I'm not sure either, but it's still pretty neat, whatever the case. And also, Final Fight 3 was the game that gave us Lucia Morgan, who actually showed up as one of the playable characters in Street Fighter V many years later, something that nobody saw coming.
Yeah,
and,
it was surprised to see them even acknowledge Final Fight 3 in anything.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, that wouldn't have been on my bingo card.
That
Then
guy-
again, they did canonize that one of Five's characters also started the entire Strider organization, so I guess
Good.
anything was the limit.
But
at that point.
they kind of playfully do a not really about that too, though.
Right.
With some of the stuff you look at, so it's like they kind of joke about it, but then he really doesn't. But
Yeah.
it depends on what people want to pay attention to, which with fans, that's how everything works out anyway.
Yeah. Moving on
Pretty
to a bit
much.
of a different tack here, though. Sharon asked, how about Battletoads?
I think it counts.
It's Brawlers.
Yeah, they're definitely
I think
they're
it counts.
definitely beat 'em ups, but do I like them?
The only one I actually liked was the arcade game.
Same.
The
here.
arcade game is the only one that's a pure beat. No, I can't even say that. The final stage. Ugh. Battletoads is a bizarre hodgepodge of genres. It's a weird. The original game, at least, is blatant false advertising. It's a massive deception where the first stage looks like it plays exactly like a belt scroller, and you think that's what the entire game is going to be. And the first boss is different. I do like the first boss a lot. It's a gigantic walker who is, I guess it's actually a rare second-person fight where it takes place through its lens and you gotta throw the rocks back at it. That's a pretty novel concept, I will say. And then the next stage is still kind of beat-em-up-y, but you're going down a rope for some reason. And then the third stage is just a racing game where you have to not die, the infamous Turbo Tunnel. And then there's Karnath's Lair, which is a bullshit platforming segment with snakes. And what else? Rat Race. Don't get me started on that freaking level. It's yeah.
You're saying you don't like it.
Actually, I don't hate the original Battletoads. I just wish that A, it had more consistency, and B, it wasn't as bullshit hard as it was.
at least a game like that should not limit your continues, or at least it should offer you passwords for being 12 freaking levels. It offers neither concession, and that's why it's considered one of the hardest NES games of all time. I don't totally agree with that. It is an extremely hard one, yes, but I did actually beat it once, not to toot my own pipe. It took like 2 weeks of training, and my brain was fried at the end of it, but it is doable. Cobra Triangle is a completely different story, but that's not beat 'em up, so that's immaterial. Battletoads and Double Dragon, though, that one is more of a legitimate beat 'em up, and it is actually a surprisingly good game. Although one stage is more like biting from asteroids from anything, but it's more of a straight beat 'em up for the most part. Or at least it did what the original game did, but better and more efficiently. So, and yes, there's the arcade game too, which is more of a straight beat 'em up, and it looks quite nice. But some parts really drag out, especially near the end. The final boss takes ages to kill. So my thoughts are kind of mixed on it, but it looks really cool at least.
But going from Battletoads to Double Dragon, that we should definitely talk more about the later games in that franchise.
Yep.
Except for 3
Yep.
and 5.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, do we have to? Because Double Dragon 5 is there.
Well,
I don't want to.
You know what we didn't talk about? Return of Double Dragon. Otherwise,
What Double Dragon?
Return of.
Oh, yes. No, that one.
Which we got in, not quite completed form as Super Double Dragon.
Exactly.
That is something our colleague Sam swears by as one of the greatest brawlers ever made.
It's a really good one. I think it's a very underrated one. For some reason, people I knew playing it in the past thought it was a little bit slowly paced. And sure, it's not the most kinetic and energetic beat 'em up of all time, but I think its fighting is pretty solid for what it is. And it's got a lot of great music in it. And it's... Granted, its enemy variety is maybe a little sparse, but it's got a good flow and pacing to it, and if you get your hands on the nunchakus, that is a really freaking good weapon in any beat 'em up. It's really fast and just cracks skulls very, very efficiently, if I do say so. But yeah, it is kind of weird, the release history that Super/Return got, like... I don't know if you want to feel that, Rob, or what.
Yeah, Return's a superior version. Wow, definitely. Although, as much as I like that, my preferred Double Dragon is still the NES Double Dragon 2.
Yep, grew up playing that one. It's still a good one.
Yeah, that one rules.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I say something about Super Double Dragon, Return of Double Dragon?
Go ahead.
Please do.
People complain about the pace of it, but I don't think it would really work if it was faster. Because it's more of a thinking man's beat 'em up, especially when you're part of the hook of it. No pun intended. Is you're trying to catch somebody's punch, and then you do that thing where you flip your leg around and kick their face back and forth.
That's so cool. Yeah.
I mean that's one of my favorite beat 'em up mechanics of all time, and I think like you said, it's not as fast as most beat 'em ups were at that point, but if it was too fast, it would lose a lot of its charm.
Yeah,
right.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I want to say that's kind of like the case with Gradius 3, because that game is really almost bullshit hard without all the slowdown. Although that is still a really cool chip that was made for it, but that's not beat 'em up, so that's immaterial.
Well,
but we get what you mean, though.
Yeah.
It's that same thing. There's quite a few games that are like that. Some games actually need the slowdown.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that.
Yeah. But moving on from Double Dragon, so we've covered that pretty thoroughly earlier. Streets of Rage. We talked about 3 quite a bit. And 4 was mentioned, 2 was mentioned, but we didn't really say much about 1.
Well, I know something about you and 1, Rob, if you wanted to mention that.
Yeah, it's actually my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
It has that specific Sega feel from the time with games like Revenge of Shinobi and E-SWAT. Fits right into that whole thing. Like they're in their own universe.
I remember I remember thinking that somehow Streets of Rage was going to be connected to Shinobi because they use that same font too. The drawing style's the same, and they use that same in-game font.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I believe Yuzo Koshiro's done music for at least some of both of them.
Yeah, because he did Revenge of Shinobi,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
and then he did the Streets of Rage, most of the Streets of Rage series.
Yeah.
So,
But yeah, I remember
He's good.
thinking they were connected too. He's one of my favorites easily. That's some incredible music.
No
that
kidding.
on a side note, I cannot wait for that new game he's working on.
Yeah, he's making a shoot 'em up. Look great from what I saw.
Saw that, yeah. He's making it like for the Genesis, isn't he?
Yes.
I think so.
I think that's what he said.
Awesome. God, that's good.
Yeah.
That's the stuff I like to see. Like FX Unit Yuki, right? Like I love when any new games get to run on old hardware.
Mm-hmm. Now, there were some other brawlers too. Obviously, we can't touch on everything tonight. We've already been going for over 2 hours. But you have other stuff too, like the Rushing Beat games. I know, James, you're a pretty big fan of a couple of those at least.
Definitely.
It was,
And to be honest, I liked all. I like all three of them, but I still feel that the first one, it seems like they were just getting the hang of it.
Yeah.
And I think they won half the battle of just like Mike mentioned earlier, just the fact that they were able to get 2-player simultaneous play, and you've got 2 different characters. I mean, that by itself, that was a huge battle to win, and that was still the early days of Super Famicom, Super Nintendo. So being able to get that to work, I mean, that was a big win. They did it before Capcom did.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I love the Rushing Beat trilogy too. In fact, I wrote the articles for them for HG 101 back in the day. And they definitely got better with each new game, I would say. Well, you could maybe make the case that Ran could be better than Shura. Hard to say, but they're both really darn good, whatever the case.
It's a toss-up there for me.
Yeah.
Before we go any further, guys, just wanted to say Tim had to go ahead and suddenly drop out and take off, but he told the rest of us to have fun. So it was great having him on the stream.
Very much
Oh,
so.
definitely. It was great being able to hang out with him on, in the stream here.
And
Absolutely.
for those of you who came in late, he is the lead singer and guitarist of the band Bathroom of the Future. You'll be hearing one of those songs when we're done. So,
Yes.
but yeah, Rushing Beat is one of those. I had a couple of them, but I never really got into them too much.
Totally fair. They're very Jalico or whatever.
And I like
Yeah,
Jalico
they're-
games.
I do too. Yeah, Psychic 5 is a good one.
I like
But,
EDF and what's the other one? Operation Logic Bomb.
Oh, that one's really good.
Oh, that's a cool one.
Yes.
But
Avenging Spirit too. But
Oh, that was really fun.
Morbid Premise,
That is an incredibly great hook of
Yes.
the ghost just possessing the enemies instead of just doing stuff himself.
yeah. Plus, there's a ton of NES games that they made that I like too, but that's neither here nor there as well.
Yeah.
There was one brawler which comes up from time to time, and I played it a few times. It's console exclusive, but does anyone here remember Pirates of Dark Water for the Super NES?
Oh yes, I
It's
rented that quite a few times. That's another one that I never managed to get a copy for myself, but I rented that more than once. It plays great. Besides the cartoon just being just a really solid adventure cartoon, especially considering what else was going on around the time.
Yeah.
They did a great job of adapting the characters to it. There's only so much you can do as far as how many enemies you can fight on screen, because like I mentioned again, you don't have that amount of arcade RAM storage where you can store that many characters into the system and then still have big sprites. You've got that trade-off. But I think Pirates of Dark Water, I think they were kind of in the pocket there of trying to balance that out. Plus you had the characters, the characters you played as were unique. So you didn't have a Billy and Jimmy situation where you could reuse the player sprites and have a whole lot of animations and save space there. You know, they had to use the characters, and they did a pretty good job with that. That was a really good licensed game.
Oh yeah. I've only played it a handful of times, but I like what I played.
Yeah. It is very good. It plays really smoothly. It's very accurate to the thing. Maybe you could use a little bit more enemy variety in a few parts of it, maybe drag on a little bit, but it is otherwise quite a solid game, and one I recommend playing.
But now,
I also did want to say something about Rushing Beat, but I don't know if I wanted to bounce back to that for a bit.
yeah, go ahead.
Really, really sucks what happened to Rushing Beat Shura in the West, aka the Peacekeepers. Really bad hack job. Oh my god.
There was a web page about that just showed all the differences. I mean, just the fact that they cut in the regular version, they cut out a lot of the music, and then even in the default mode, we're gonna have ambient sounds in the background instead of music. How about that?
Shit.
It's like no, just give us some music. And that series has some great music to it.
Excellent. Yeah. No.
I love the sound. Oh, good.
Yeah. No. Pretty much all the music that got cut out was really damn good. I really liked the theme that played in the abandoned hospital, for example, and the Japanese dojo theme was a really good one as well. And of course, as Brawl Brothers did, there's a fantastic reprise of the original of the first game's first stage music, which I guess would be the sort of series leitmotif. And yeah, a whole lot of good stuff that we lost, in addition to making the game really hard by giving you less than half of the continues you're supposed to have. Jerks.
And mangling a bunch of the special attacks, and just there are things you kind of wonder, why did you do this to make it worse when it was extra work?
Exactly.
That's the part I don't understand, but you never know what the deal is behind the scenes. You know, sometimes somebody saying, "Oh, make this more for a Western audience," and I mean the endings aren't really translated because they did. From what I read in interviews, they interviewed one of the people working at Jellicoe USA, and they said I don't even think they had on-site translators at the company.
Damn.
And that would explain why. That would explain why we really didn't get endings for. So they could only do what they could do. I mean, I'm happy we got the games, but it would have been nice if they could have sprung for some translations. It would be nice to see a collection with them properly translated, and with all our continues back.
Yeah, isn't there at least a ROM hack by now that gives an English script to the Japanese version?
There should be.
There really should be if there isn't. Let me check, actually.
Because even the screens where when you rescue in RAN, when you rescue one of the characters, in Brawl Brothers, they all say the same thing when you rescue somebody. But in the Japanese version, Rushing Beat RAN, they say something different in each one. But I don't know what they're saying because I can't read Japanese.
Yeah, same here.
Let's see.
I really need to go back through that and get screenshots of all that and see if I can get someone to translate them, because I always wondered what they're saying, because they're obviously character specific. Yeah. So maybe you could get a bit more insight as to, with the characters.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Also, LDP is here. So,
is that El Diener?
That is El Diener. So,
hey, Diener, what up?
Welcome to the stream. So, you got here just we're on the verge of wrapping up. Tim already left, but we got a couple more things to cover, and then that's basically going to do it for us tonight.
It doesn't look like there is a translation of Rushing Beat Shura. BS. Someone needs to get on that.
They will at some point.
I sure hope so.
There is one other brawler I wanted to talk about.
Yes.
And it's one that never had any kind of home port to my knowledge. It was strictly arcade. And that would be Night Slashers.
Yes.
Oh, that's one of the best.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Love
good.
that
So
game.
good. Yeah. Yeah, Data East had some really damn good ones in the 90s. I consider that one, Boogie Wings, and the Cliffhanger Edward Randy as almost a holy trinity of excellent Data East arcade titles. They might have had a few others around that time. Those were the three that really stand out to me.
Yeah, those were great. But
They really deserve a lot. They really deserve a lot more credit than they get, especially for putting out Night Slashers. That's one of the best arcade brawlers out there.
I love the
Yeah.
little go sign they have in that.
Go to hell!
Yeah.
It's so good. It's such almost, I would say, an almost adorably Halloweeny game, but it is also
yeah.
by and far one of the goriest games I've ever played. It almost puts Splatterhouse to shame, or
Almost,
at least
but
it's
not quite.
comparable.
Yeah.
It's on a similar level, at least, I would say.
Mhm.
That zombie that walks around with intestines hanging out and swinging while it walks. That is easily my favorite video game zombie. Period.
Yes, yes.
I mean,
absolutely.
just the way that thing walks, it has. He's got some of that Tarman bop to him, as far as
yes.
just from Return of the Living Dead. He's got
yeah.
some of that flavor to him. That, I mean, Night Slashers. If you're a horror fan and never heard of Night Slashers and you've got a Switch, see if you can get that. What other systems is that on? Because I know Arcade Archives I know they got it on Switch because I bought it. But does anyone know if that's on any other systems?
Well, I know it never made it
Unfortunately-
to anything back in the day. It was just strictly arcade game for the longest time.
Yeah.
Night
And I-
Slashers.
And I didn't even know about it until I got on the internet and someone made there's a game called first it was just Beats of Rage. Then they made a version called Open Beats of Rage where you can customize it more. And
Yeah.
people use that to make their own beat 'em ups. Someone made a Night Slashers modified version in that engine. And that's when I first heard of Night Slashers. And I'm
Okay.
thinking, oh man, what is this?
Mhm.
And I mean, when you finally get to play it, if you're a fan of horror movies and you like beat 'em ups or just action games in general, you'll dig Night Slashers because there's a bit of everything in there.
Yeah, such a good game.
Yeah, there are werewolves, Frankenstein's monsters, rock golems, mad slashers, giant dudes with axes. I mean, the villain looks like Dracula at first, but no,
looks like
he's
Egon-
only.
He
He's
looks
only
like
half
Egon
Egon.
Dracula.
He does have
He looks-
Egon's hair from the real Ghostbusters. You're
That's a
right.
true-
Yeah, I just keep calling him Egon Dracula there.
I mean, Data East did make the real Ghostbusters arcade game, so maybe there's something there. Although that game
That is a
originally,
good
I don't
point.
think had anything to do with Ghostbusters.
Yeah, I forgot what the original name of that was, but
Same.
yeah, it would be funny if they did do that as an in joke though.
Absolutely.
There are easily so many other games we could cover here, enough to do a second round table like this. I mean, you've got the Super NES Sonic Blast Man games. You've got
The first one's okay. Second one's great, in my opinion.
Second one's great.
yeah.
Yes.
You got Arabian Magic.
Yeah, the good one that wasn't Arabian Fight. The one that was not Arabian Fight. Taito did this Magic, and it was quite good.
And Warrior Blade, Rasan Saga 3.
Other Taito one, the double cabinet as well, or triple even. Wide. Cool.
And with some of the most awesome stage names I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But one in particular that I think we should close out with is another home exclusive, and originally on the Saturn, later ported to the Xbox 360 and I think the PS3. That would be Guardian Heroes.
All right.
That
And I've never had a chance to play it because it's always on a system I don't own.
Oh darn!
Yeah,
I actually did have it for the Saturn, and I did play it a lot.
so did I.
And for the most part, I like it quite a lot. Except, I don't know if I wanted to get into the part that really grinds my proverbial gears, but you say the good things about it, Dyer, if you'd like.
Well, I do like the fact you have your traveling companion.
Yeah, oh yeah, the Golden Warrior is amazing.
Yeah.
He's invincible. That's a good thing. He's not a load. And he can actually almost manhandle enemies entirely, and you just command him from afar, which, I guess that also kind of makes it a bit of a proxy strategy game. I don't know.
I've done that on occasion, actually. And
Yeah, it gets hard, so it's a good strategy.
for a genre that doesn't really need serious storytelling, it's got a pretty in-depth story.
Yes, and many branching pathways. There are
Yes.
5 different endings, if I'm not mistaken, and several ways that you can get to said endings as well. And one of the final bosses is an XP of Gold and Silver, the final boss of Gunstar Heroes.
Yep.
Those two games had an odd connection. I mean, they're both treasure, they both end with heroes, and they both had Gold and Silver in them, but that was really where the similarities end. So, yeah, I'm not sure if it's just a wink and a nod.
And the amount of playable characters you have is actually pretty good.
Yes, absolutely.
But going back to something you'd said earlier, one of them is a wizard. I think his name was Edward, and his little rabbit friend was named Randy.
Edward Randy! What do you know? Wait. Data East, Treasure, where's the connection?
One of the guys who programmed Gunstar Heroes was a huge fan of Edward Randy.
Oh, yeah, right. I remember this now.
Mm-hmm. And, but yeah, that is a very good game. If you'd like to go ahead and air your grievances about it, go ahead.
Yeah, there's, I think you could add a few more continues. The game does get kind of batshit difficult, midway and later on, and some of the enemies also kind of get spongy too, but, I think there's also kind of an RPG-ish element to the game, for better or worse. It's been a while since I played it, so my memory's fuzzy. But the one major bugbear I do remember is that the apparent big bad of the game, an asshole wizard named Cannon, at around the halfway point, somewhere between halfway to 2/3 into the game, he has to go into some sort of, big 5-minute spiel about the backstory of whatever the hell's going on in the game. And it is unfucking skippable. And no matter what pathway you take, you will always have to suffer through this bullshit. It just really grinds the pacing of the game to a abrupt halt. And oh man, I hope the Xbox 360 port or whatever gave you the option to at least skip around that. Unfortunately, I never played that, so I'm not sure. It doesn't help that then Cannon himself is a really hard boss fight, so just add injury to insult, as it were. Cannon sucks, and I hate him.
I have the 360 port, but I haven't made it that far.
Gotcha. No worries. But other than that, Garden Heroes is pretty goddamn good. I was quite fond of the ninja Genburo or whatever his name was. I forget. Shoot. Genjiro. Yes, that was it. Right.
So, I think with that, we're going to call it a night.
There was one question I wanted to ask, but we've already... This is pretty long, and I babbled way too much, so maybe we should just close it.
Well, let me be the judge. Go ahead, ask your question.
Okay. What do you guys think about when Street Fighter II exploded and one-on-one fighters became the dominant arcade force in the 90s, arguably at the detriment of beat-em-ups and their worth in the public eye?
You really want to know what I thought?
I know you hated it.
How about
you?
Yeah,
pretty much.
How about you, James?
As much as I love fighting games, I do I'm irritated by the fact that it took a bit of the shine away from the beat 'em up genre, because that was the perfect game when you went to the mall with a bunch of your friends or just ran into some cool strangers that you could just walk through the streets and fight crime with fictionally.
I will say, on the flip side, what with everyone being crowded around all the versus fighters, left all the other arcade games basically free.
Definitely.
That's how I got to play a few of them back in the day I'd never gotten to play before, like Bionic Commando and Strider.
Right. I mean, I'm of two minds of when this happened because beat 'em ups didn't entirely die in 1991, right when Street Fighter II debuted. If anything, for
Yeah.
several years, they actually got better than they ever did because, from 93 to 96 or whatever, that's around the time that Night Slashers and Ninja Baseball Batman and Violent Storm and Alien vs. Predator and all those giga awesome ones we mentioned were released. Plus, also, fighting games informed most of these higher quality beat 'em ups having like fighting game commands that really expanded the move list beyond your basic punches, jump attacks, and throws. And I would say that to an extent, fighting games did inform the design of beat 'em ups, and the genre learned from fighters as a result, and that was pretty damn neat. But
And
yeah, they did. Oh, sorry, Brian, go ahead.
I was about to say it's funny you have the same person to thank when he
Capcom,
put together
yeah.
Street Fighter with Final Fight and Street Fighter 2 made by the same teams.
Absolutely.
And with Final Fight, it replaced the more context-heavy controls of Double Dragon, which Konami kept going with their licensed, 4-player fighters.
Yeah.
And basically, with Final Fight, it was what you do is what you do. So every move has its own distinct action. But with Double Dragon, you might want to try to throw somebody, but you'll hit forward at the wrong time and you won't throw them or something weird like that. And then that seemed to carry on, like you said, to the fighting games, and then part of that went back into the beat 'em ups.
Yeah.
So there's a back and forth between them that I think they both benefit from it.
Absolutely. There was something of a symbiotic relationship going into it. I mean, if you wanted a really literal example, of course, Final Fight characters started getting integrated into Street Fighter in the Street Fighter Alpha and onward. So, the genres, I think, especially due to Capcom spearheading the fighting movement and also making some of the best beat 'em ups ever around the time, it actually did do surprisingly well for a while, all things considered. Then around 97, 98, beat 'em ups did actually start to die, and actually not too long after, 2D fighting games started to die too.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
So, but then both genres... Yeah.
It was still good eating for the fans because we were still, we didn't give up on them, but it seemed like they were being made less.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And in the 6th gen, for better or worse, they were both kind of still at that point. But then, of course, Street Fighter 4 brought fighting games back, and then beat 'em ups, even in a more indie capacity, have returned. I mean, nowadays we got the fantastic Streets of Rage 4 and the also quite good TMNT Shredder's Revenge, among several others, like Scott Pilgrim, as Tim mentioned earlier, and Fight and Rage is a pretty good one too. So yeah, they're in a pretty good place now, for better or worse, I'd say.
And there were and the fans of the genre knew where to go because there were things like River City Ransom Underground that started off as a Kickstarter.
Yeah, right.
And that directly leads into River City Girls because you've got the same, you've got a lot of the same people working on it, and there are characters in that series that started off in River City Ransom Underground first.
Yeah, Provi in RCG2 was one of the playable characters from Underground, which I actually liked Underground. It was a very, very flawed game, and the characters were very imbalanced. Like, Provi and Paul were absolutely at best, and most others were not nearly as good. Some outright sucked, but I still liked the game for what it was. It did kind of feel like a prototype test run for the much more refined River City Girls to come a few years later, so I respected it for what it did.
Maybe we'll
There's one.
Oh, good, Brian.
Okay. There's one thing I really like to bring up about River City Ransom Underground that I like about it. It's the fact that the main memory I have of River City Ransom, the original, and it was brought up earlier in the stream, was that when you first play it, the game kicks your butt because it's nothing that you're used to before. You have to adjust to it, and once you do, it's an enjoyable game. River City Ransom Underground changes things just enough so that you won't be completely familiar with it. So when you start that game, you get your butt whooped. And being able to change it just enough to have that happen again, that's not an easy thing to do without messing it up. And they didn't mess that up.
Absolutely.
Nice. All right, guys, we really should call it a night.
Yep.
So-
I've dragged
My
it out
voice-
long enough. So.
My voice is going out anyway, so
All right, so
Yeah, I should have brought some water.
I've included links in the description here for everyone's either streams or band web pages or art sites or everything. So by all means, check all those out. And we'll leave you off with the sounds of Bathroom of the Future and their song Capcom Girl. Until then, next time, whatever that may be, whatever we're doing, I think it's cute retro games next. Until then, y'all have a good night.